Hello. May I be sweet and presumptuous for a second?
Sure.
Oh, I like your attitude already. I feel like you're gonna keep me on my toes.
Oh, I might. I'm good at that.
Really? I don't know if I can trust you.
Why?
That look in your eyes.
I'm very trustworthy.
Are you really?
I am.
I don't know how I feel about that. Come on, let's get a drink before I have to be more drunk for this conversation.
Do you? I don't think you're very shy. I think that's a ploy.
A ploy?
Yes.
What on earth would I be ploying? What excites you?
Excites me. Let's see. Good conversation. New experiences. Risk.
Thanks a lot. You guys have a good night.
After you do.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, sir.
You're going.
Cobalt, please. Yeah. How good does the air conditioning feel? I actually want to start backwards. I want to start at the end. I want to start with closing. Okay, the structure we're going to follow for how to go from open to close is open, hook, emotional connection, physical connection, and then close. Okay, but the reason why I want to teach close first is this. When guys learn the early stages, a lot of times they'll learn how to do something in sort of a gimmicky way or a way that doesn't get them the whole way because they don't have the end in mind. For example, when we did canned structured game, a lot of times you could fall into what we call like dancing monkey mode, which is you go in, you're very high energy, you're telling a lot of stories, you're making yourself like the center of attention, and because you're entertaining and engaging, you'll get the girl into you, get the girl hooked, but she's hooked on the entertainment, she's not hooked on you as a person. What would happen is as long as you're being entertaining, as long as you're like being the dancing monkey and doing like magic tricks and like telling jokes, she likes you. As soon as that subsides, she's like, that was fun, thanks, and leaves. Because she never actually hooked on you, she hooked on the activity or she hooked on the entertainment, okay? And that's because we're focused on how do you try and hook every set, not how do you get laid as often as possible. All right, so we were focusing on things that appeared to get us somewhere along the way, but didn't get us the whole way, okay? So what I kind of want to start with is I want you to think about what would be the ideal scenario at the end of a pickup. How should it look like when you get her to your bedroom? Okay, and what I'm gonna say is it shouldn't look like you escalating on her and like you try and touch her, she's like no, and you try and touch her more and she's like no, no, no. It should not look like that. It should look the opposite. It should look like her escalating on you. It should look like at the very least, because her escalating on you, that's pretty extreme. It's nice when it happens, but at the very least, it should look like her participating in the escalation. Okay? She needs to be an active participant and a willing participant, ideally. Now, there will be a lot of times when you will get last minute resistance. That's nature of the game, and if you're never getting last minute resistance, that means you're not pulling enough. If you're only getting the girls home that are so into you, they're escalating on you, that's a problem too, because it means you're only getting that small segment. However, ideally, you should structure things so that it's possible that could happen. You should structure things with that end in mind, okay? So that's what you're going for. So with that said, everything you do along the way, from the open all the way to the close, should be with the idea of getting the girl to invest, getting the girl to chase you. That is absolutely critical to what you're doing in game, okay? So it's not like game is something you do to her. Game is an experience you give her and you have with her that allows her to start escalating on you and chasing you, all right? And so I like to say that LMR starts from the open. Okay, last minute resistance doesn't start in the bedroom, it starts from hello. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at what's gonna go down when you do get a girl back to your place or back to a bedroom. Okay, a few things that guys commonly mess up on. First mistake that guys make a lot. They will get the girl back to their place and immediately the second they're in the door, try and make out with her when they walk in the door, okay? Now, what does this convey to the girl? It conveys a few very bad things. Number one, it conveys that you're horny and needy, okay? Number two, it conveys that you haven't been there before, right? If you were a guy who was having sex every single night with a hot girl, when you got a girl back to your place, would that be a moment of extreme excitement for you? Would that be a moment where you have to take huge action? Or would that just be like another sort of moment in your life that you can enjoy as it is and take for its own sake, as opposed to having an outcome in mind and as opposed to having an objective for the girl, okay? Everything that you do should come from the idea of making it an experience for the girl. Has this idea, which I really, really like. He says, think of the pickup like a movie, okay? The sex is the last 5 minutes of the movie. That's the best part. However, the last 5 minutes of the movie don't mean anything without the rest of the movie before. You wouldn't want to turn on a movie and just watch only the last 5 minutes. Now, as guys, we kind of would. As guys, we love like the porno idea, right? It's like we walk up, and you do some like crazy, like cheesy 70s music in the background, and within like a minute, your dick's inside of her. And that can happen sometimes. But most of the time, that's not how it's gonna happen. Most of the time, you need to have that experience. And it needs to be something that just happened as opposed to something that was pre-planned, because the girl doesn't want to feel slutty about it, okay? That's a key component of game, is the idea that girls want sex. Sex is better for them, but it's your job as a man to make them not slutty. Okay? In fact, almost everything you do in terms of logistics, in terms of setting up the pull, in terms of managing what comes out of your mouth, avoiding certain phrases, that's all to keep the girl from feeling slutty. And when you get the girl back to your place, not jumping on her in the first 5 minutes makes her not feel as slutty. It makes her feel like she can be calm and relaxed and safe around you and let things unfold in a way that's pleasurable to her as opposed to forced on her. Second mistake guys make when they get back to their place is they will try and get the girl immediately and directly into the bedroom. Again, this can work if the girl's super down, super on, but it's not necessary, and you'll widen your scope if you don't do it. Okay, here's another key component of game, or key idea in game. At any given point in the game, whether it be open, close, anywhere, there's a certain level of things you can get away with, and there's a certain range of girls that would be receptive. For example, on the open, if you open with, hey, I want to fuck you now. If this big circle here is the entire like range of women on the planet, the girls who are receptive to I want to fuck you now is probably like this, right? Some tiny little circle within that range. If you went up to every girl and said, hey, I want to fuck you now, some girls would be receptive to it. Some girls, the ones that are receptive to it, would be very down, and you would get laid if you just did it enough, okay? But you're limiting yourself to this tiny segment here instead of the broad scope of all the girls available to you. If instead you said, hey, you're kind of cute, I'd like to talk to you, instead of this little bit, you're gonna get a much bigger segment. And within that segment, you're gonna get all the same ones you would have gotten with that smaller segment, okay? Similarly, if the second you get a girl back to your place, you like and run her into the bedroom, certain small percentage of girls will be down for that at that point, but that percentage would also be down for a bit of a slower approach as long as you're escalating. So it makes more sense, you've already invested this time, you've got the girl back to your place, to take that slower approach, have a higher percentage chance of it working, and then it'll still work on the girls that are super down as well. Does that make sense? Okay? So a lot of what you're doing in game is you're trying to play the percentages. You're trying to do things in an intelligent manner that is going to give you the highest possible chance of succeeding. So first mistake, don't her in the door. Second mistake, don't take her straight to the bedroom. If you take her straight to the bedroom, it's conveying again, you just want sex, right? If you instead, you're like, hey, what's up? You want a drink? Have a seat for a second. I'm going to go wash my hands, whatever. Whatever you're doing, you get her comfortable in your place, you let it happen more naturally, you escalate more naturally, then again, you're widening the scope of girls that would be receptive to that. Now, that doesn't give you the excuse to just chode around and never make a move. That's actually worse, right? That's probably the biggest male mistake, is not making a move. So that's the opposite end of the spectrum, is just sitting with them, never trying anything. Don't go there either. Okay, so you got him back to your place, chill with them on the couch, and realize also, or chill with them on couch, balcony, living room, wherever, and realize you don't even need a bedroom to have sex. I would say over the last year of my life, most of the sex I've had did not start in a bed, okay? Now, a lot of it finished in a bed, but most of it probably did not start in a bed. A lot of it started on a couch, or standing up against a wall, or beside a pool, or in a bathroom somewhere, or wherever, okay? And the reason for that is that it's actually easier, surprisingly, or in an alley. It's actually easier, and funny enough, here's the really ironic thing. The girl will oftentimes feel less slutty about fucking you in an alley than about fucking you in a bed. Maybe not afterwards, but at the time of, okay? And the reason why is because when it's in an alley or by a pool, it just happened. When it is in a bedroom, or in a bed or in a bedroom, they acknowledged that they were going there and they willingly went with you to a bedroom. So they have some some volition in the activity, they have some fault, right? They are somehow responsible, right? A big part of your job as a man is to take the responsibility off of their shoulders. So don't think that it has to go down in a bedroom. Don't think any of that. The key components for sex are you're alone enough that she's not going to get caught, and she's aroused enough to do it. That's pretty much it, okay? Those are the only criteria for sex. Everything else is superfluous. Now, certain situations are better or easier than others, but everything else is not completely necessary. So that's all you're working on. Again, from open to close, all you're working on is get her alone with you and get her aroused enough for it to happen. That's it. Nothing more than that, okay? And be flexible and be creative in how you do that. Don't think that it has to go by some standard plan. Once you get to actually escalating with the girl, key concept in escalation, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Many of you will have heard this before, all right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The idea here is you always want to be pushing forward to the level that she is okay with, but no further, okay? If you push too far, you get a no, and it's okay to get no's, but they make it take longer, okay? Ironically, by trying to go faster, you will go slower because you'll introduce the word no into the equation, okay? So you try and go too fast, you get a no, and instead of trying to save that 5 minutes by going too fast or by going faster, you waste 45 minutes of her rejecting you and getting uncomfortable and you having to back all the way up and start over again. You're much better off not pushing to the point of no, but pushing to the point just short of no and then backing off. However, on the flip side, you do have to push. You do have to make the move. The girl will not make the move for you 95% of the time, okay? You have to be pushing forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The key idea here, though, is that the girl already likes you. By the time you've got the girl back to your place, again, emotionally she likes you, and ideally logically she likes you. She's made some sort of commitment to you. She's said things like, I like you, you're cute, you're amazing. She's done some physical escalation on you. Doesn't have to be much, even a little bit is huge, but she's already committed to some degree. So basically, you're trading discomfort is what I'm going to call it. Okay, so you're pushing forward, you're escalating. She might be a little uncomfortable with that escalation. She might be a little uncomfortable with your hand going to a certain place on her body. However, if you were to withdraw your attention because she says no or whatever and you back off, and then there's that awkward silence or there's that lack of stimulation, that lack of stimulation should feel worse to her than whatever escalation you were doing did. Does that make sense? Okay? So the fact of losing your attention feels more uncomfortable than the escalation. So that's her trade-off, right? And when that's the trade-off, it's easier to allow you to escalate than not. When it's more painful or more awkward for you to escalate, then that's when she'll resist it. Okay? So that's the equation we're looking for. And the key thing you're looking for next is what I call the point of no return. Point of no return is a concept that came to me very, very painfully over many, many pulls that didn't go down. And what I would notice is that if I had a date that went really well, it would really, really well, usually end in sex. If I had a date that went kind of well, usually we'd get back to my place and we'd hang out a little bit, we'd make out a little bit, it wouldn't go too far, and then she'd leave, and then oftentimes she'd come out for another date later and then something could actually go down. However, the ones that were kind of in between that were really on, but for some reason didn't quite get to sex. The ones where clothes are coming off, I'm fingering her, it's real hot and heavy, pulling hair, saying all kinds of slutty type of things. And then for some reason, sex doesn't happen. I found that almost never would I get a call back from the girl later. Almost never would I get another date later. So that point where you're not gonna get another date is what I call the point of no return. Okay, that's where if you go past that point, you better damn well have sex or you're never seeing the girl again. Okay? Be aware of where that point is. Now, where is that point generally? It depends on case by case, but typically it's where you're doing something that's so overtly sexual she can't justify it. Okay, so if she starts talking super dirty to you, that could be point of no return. Or for a lot of girls, it's when you actually start fingering them. Once your fingers actually touch vagina, then point of no return, right? So you want to be very careful and cautious of when that happens. The other one is when her clothes start coming off, point of no return, okay? But you'll kind of know it for any particular girl. You'll kind of get a sense for, oh my God, this is about to happen or not. And when that's the case, you want to be very careful that they are participating. Because if you're going across the point of no return and you're pushing and they're resisting, there's a very high likelihood you're going to get last minute resistance, it's not going to go down, and then you're going to never see the girl again, right? And even if it's a one night stand situation, within the last minute resistance itself, if you push past the point of no return in the wrong way, you're more likely to get her flipping out and like leaving, as opposed to staying, letting you recycle and try again. Or letting you stay, like take her for a quick walk, bring her back, and then start all over again. As long as you haven't crossed the point of no return, you have a lot of those options. Once you've crossed that point, when she leaves, she's really leaving. So be very cognizant of that. And the things you want to look for at that point are, is she escalating on you? That's the biggest one, and it doesn't have to be much, right? If you're making out with her and she just like squeezes your back a little bit or starts running her hands up and down your back, that's good, right? If she starts, if she kisses you unprovoked, that's good. If she starts nibbling on your neck, that's good. Anything that she's doing to you that doesn't give her direct pleasure is very, very, very good. If she ever asks you to escalate, that's good. If she says, I need you to kiss me here, or take my hand, that sort of thing, that's very good. Again, anything where she is an active participant in the sex, that's what you want, okay? You want that to be the case. Also, ideally, the entire interaction to this point should have been structured in such a way that occasionally she's chasing you. Okay, because again, if you're chasing, she's pushing away, that's not a good vibe for the interaction. That's a vibe that leads to bad last minute resistance as opposed to good last minute resistance. So that's very, very critical. Also, if you're pushing forward the whole way and never pushing her away and never making her chase, she knows how the movie ends, right? Again, take this movie metaphor. If you went to a movie and you knew in advance how the movie ended, you would enjoy it less than if you didn't. You'd enjoy the movie less than if there was suspense. So keep that suspense there. Keep her chasing to a certain degree. That's absolutely critical for the close, but because it's critical for the close, it's critical throughout the entire rest of the set. Other quick tips for the close. Take your clothes off first. Okay, why is that? So say that you're getting hot and heavy, you're escalating with a girl, it's getting pretty intense, and you start like trying to take her clothes off. There's a very good chance that she may try and like hold them on, or she may be resistant to that, okay? And her resistance will take a physical form, it will take an active form. Whereas contrast that to, say you're halfway across the room, or you're even close to or whatever, and instead of trying to take her shirt off, you take your shirt off, right? The message being conveyed is the same. The message being conveyed is still, this is going in a sexual direction. However, she's much less likely to grab your shirt and try and hold it on than she is to grab hers and hold it on. Does that make sense? So you're getting the same message across in a way that requires less compliance. That's another very key concept to effective game, okay? Most of what you do with a girl, most of the escalation you do, the escalation itself isn't that important. What's more important is the message you're conveying when you escalate, okay? So taking your shirt off conveys the same message as taking her shirt off, but taking your shirt off is easier. So most of the time, taking your shirt off is the better move. Make sense? Right? Or trying to finger her is, it conveys one message. Putting her hand on your dick conveys the same message. Now, fingering her arouses her much more. So there is something to be said for that one. But that said, the message is the same, and the one is far less risky, especially if you can do it as though it's almost like an accident. Okay? As though you can do it so it's not her fault. So look for ways that you can do that. Look for ways that you can get the same communication, that same level of intensity, that same level of sexuality and sensuality without making it her fault, without asking for compliance. And that theme is going to come up over and over and over again as we discuss all the other stages of the pickup. I know many, many times when I pull a girl, if I have a time constraint or I feel like I have to get up early in the morning or she has an early flight and I'm in a rush, a lot of times if that rush makes me push faster, I mess it up, I get a no, and then I don't end up making it. A lot of times, on the other hand, if I know I have a rush and I just decide, you know what, this is either going to go down or it's not, I'm just going to do the best I can, I'm going to enjoy the process, so often it goes down like so instantly, it's like it makes my head spin. Right? I remember a lot of my best pulls over the last year where I was in Vegas flying out the next day to go to a boot camp, and I had like a 6 a.m. flight, or like so I had to leave for the airport at like 4 or something like that. And so I'm probably not even packed half the time. So I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I can pull tonight. This is ridiculous. I don't even know why I'm out. And I'm just like, oh, I'll just help my students out. I'll just go have some fun. I'll just joke around. Then next thing you know, some girl's like, I love you, you're amazing, and making out with me. I'm like, holy shit. And home we go. Why? Because I'm not pushing it. I'm not trying to rush anything. I'm just letting it happen naturally. And when you're letting it happen naturally, you're conveying non-neediness, you're being in the moment, and that's what makes it work. All right, so you want that same vibe throughout the interaction, but especially at the close, especially at that moment when you could get the most outcome dependent. You want to be truly enjoying the moment, enjoying the escalation with the girl, as opposed to just thinking in your head that like escalation's a checkbox, right? It's not like tick this box, then tick this box, then tick this box. It's not like that. It should be an experience and it should be enjoyed by both parties, okay? Quick word on it not being a checkbox. One of the most important escalation moves for a lot of guys is the kiss, right? Everybody thinks, you kiss a girl, you're down. Well, I've slept with, I think, roughly around, I would say 10 or 12 girls in my life who would not kiss me before sleeping with me, right? Now, as compared to the total number of girls I've slept with, that's a tiny fraction, but it's significant. And interestingly enough, a lot of those were among the hottest girls I've ever slept with. So definitely a worthwhile fraction. And why is that? Why would a girl sleep with you but not kiss you? Well, a lot of the other escalation moves you can do are not her fault. But the kiss definitely is her fault because she's participating, right? So especially if a girl has a boyfriend, she may not want to kiss you. She may be aroused by everything. She may allow things to happen, but she may not want the kiss to happen because she has fault in that. Again, some of the hottest girls I've ever slept with, who in some cases I know had boyfriends, they told me either before or after. In some cases I don't know, but I would assume they probably did. They did the absolute maximum to make it not their fault, right? They basically gave me shit tests the entire way home, never gave me a single positive, never escalated with me overtly, but they just kind of allowed me to stay with them, allowed me to get into bed with them, allowed me to stay over, and then one thing led to another. It just happened, and probably they didn't kiss me. And oftentimes, they didn't even kiss me after sex, okay? So even the kiss, which a lot of people think is one of the key moves for escalation, is not necessary to escalate, right? And if the kiss isn't necessarily certainly holding her hand or hugging her or pulling her hair, none of those are necessary either. So don't think that there's ever one path. Don't think that just because you get resistance on one thing, that you'll get resistance on something else. Or don't think that no means no forever, or that there's not another route. There are a million different ways to get to sex, and your success is not determined by, this will come up more in opening, but success is not determined by whether the girl takes your hand early in the set. She could reject your hand early in the set and have sex with you later. I've had many girls reject giving me a number early in the set, and then I stick in with it, and then I stick in with it. I end up having sex with them. Don't think that resistance or reaction badly now or not escalating at a certain point means that it's not going to go down later. That's simply not the case, as long as the other signals are there. So don't ever think that rejection is everything, and don't think that it has to go down some smooth, predetermined path. Every pull that you have in your entire life will be a little bit different, okay? A lot of them are formulaic, and they do follow a set game plan. Even then, they are very, very different at the same time. So one LMR move is the holding the two hands. The other one that I really like, and this one's for point of no return, is what I call the preemptive freeze out, okay? You guys may be familiar with the freeze out from old school, pickup theory. The freeze out basically is this idea that if the girl reacts badly or resists at a certain point, what you do is you completely withdraw attention and go in the next room, or just roll over and go to sleep, or pretend to go to sleep, that sort of thing. You withdraw your attention completely. The idea of the freeze out being that the freeze out is more awkward for her and it makes her feel worse than whatever escalation was going on. That's the general idea of the freeze out. And the freeze out's a very, very powerful move. However, the freeze out's also a little bit reactive, right? You're supposed to do the freeze out ideally in a way that looks not reactive, looks like you don't care. But if it's in direct reaction to a rejection, it obviously is going to come off a little bit butthurt, okay? So my favorite move, though, is the preemptive freeze out. It's the freeze out without cause, okay? It's the freeze out when things are going well instead of when things are going badly. So say that I have a girl back at my place, and we're escalating, things are starting to go well. We're getting to that point of things could be about at point of no return. It's getting a little hot and heavy. But I'm looking at it based on my experience, and I'm not sure it's going to go down, okay? Right at that moment, one of my favorite things to do is break it off, take a break, go to the next room, go use the restroom, go grab another drink, something like that, and then come back. And ideally what I would do is I would come back and not pick up right where we left off, right? Have you guys ever had a girl do this? Right? You've ever had a girl do this? Where like you're on the bed, it's going well, and she's like, hang on, give me a second, I have to go to the bathroom. Then she goes to the bathroom, comes back, and instead of sitting back next to you on the bed, she goes and sits like on the chair. And you're like, what the fuck? This girl was on the bed with me, we were making out, and now she's like halfway across the room, what just happened? Right? Now, if, as a guy that gets to you, imagine how much it must get to a girl. Imagine what that must do to a girl, okay? So use that to your advantage. Again, key concept is make it not her fault, get her chasing, and watch out for that point of no return. That's the key concept. The tactic is preemptive freeze out, all right? And that's very, very, very effective in setting things up. Yeah?
I see what you mean, but the thing is that the problem is if you completely interrupt it, the first thing, it can also work on our ego, so it doesn't want me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the thing is that girls get turned on by the fact that you really want them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I already had something like that, because I used to do a lot of freeze outs, and I stopped with it together actually.
Right.
That it completely turned on me actually, and that they were like saying themselves, I could actually see them thinking that, you want to play it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like,
And then they decided to play games with you too.
yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, two things on that. One I would say is, so if you get the girl back and she's like, eating your face already and like totally on, don't be silly and do a freeze out when you don't need to. Like again, this is for when you sense that you won't get through the point of no return otherwise. So don't like throw in a technique just to throw in the technique, always use it in the appropriate time. The second thing is you want to use it early enough that it's not such a break. So you don't want to, if you've already been fingering her and you were super close, almost had your penis inside of her, like very close and like it was rubbing there, that's not the time to do a preemptive freeze out, because then you go to the next room and she starts to think, oh shit, what happened, what's going on, and she'll come to her senses. You should actually do it way before that, when you're just making out a little bit, so that it's not such a huge break and it's not a break at a moment where she might feel guilty. So yeah, be very judicious in the use of this. You don't want to just use it blindly with respect to timing or with respect to situation, but it can be a useful tool. So I'm gonna go then to opening, hooking, all that kind of stuff, but I want you to keep in mind as I go through all of these other stages, the things I've told you in closing. Because there's a very big difference between what I call good game and effective game. Okay? There's a lot of guys that know how to get a lot of indicators of interest from a girl, a lot of guys that know how to like spike buying temperature and get a big reaction, but don't know how to get laid. Right? In fact, for years, we would go in and we'd have all these like pre-canned routines, we'd be comedically tight, we would like devalidate the girl, we'd get her chasing us, touching us, but as soon as we dropped the energy, we'd lose the set because we had started off with a bad premise. We started off with the premise of she's on a pedestal, we have to be very entertaining, we have to be very amazing, and as soon as we're not amazing, we're not enough. Right? And we weren't going in with the idea of seduction, we were going in with the idea of entertainment almost, okay? Or are we going in with the idea of like pushing her buttons? And there's not necessarily a correlation between the two. So whenever you're in your game, don't just be thinking about how do I get to the next stage. Do be thinking about that. Do be thinking how do I get from A to B, from B to C, C to D, but also be thinking, is the way that I'm getting from A to B or B to C actually gonna get me to Z? Or is that gonna interfere with getting to Z? Okay, so as I go through the earlier stages, keep in mind the things I've said with regards to closing. Keep in mind the idea that you want her to be an active participant. Keep in mind the idea that you want her chasing. And keep in mind the idea that from the very first moment, you're actually working on last minute resistance. Okay, last minute resistance is not something you start addressing in the bedroom. It's something you start addressing the moment you say hello. Okay? So keep those in mind as we go through open, hook, emotional connection, and physical connection. Also, I'll tell you, because it's a technical lecture, I'm gonna talk a lot more about the open and the hook and not so much about the connection phases, because those are more like sort of artistic, organic phases, but I will give you some pointers for those as well. All right, so let's talk about the open. Everybody always asks, what's the best opener? What do you say to the girl? That sort of thing. And the thing is, it doesn't matter. Hello. May I be mildly presumptuous and forward for 10 seconds or less?
Sure.
You are far too cute to be talking on your phone or texting on your phone instead of talking to cute local boys.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome. Who are you? It absolutely 100% does not matter. I have opened with the weirdest, worst things and gotten laid. I have opened with the best things and gotten nowhere. What does matter are two things. Your vibe off the open matters tremendously. I actually will say three things. Your vibe off the open matters tremendously. That you're loud enough to get her attention matters tremendously. And what you say immediately after the open matters. Those are the three things that matter. What you actually say matters almost none. Okay? So you can open with pretty much anything. Now there are a couple different philosophies on opening. One is the direct philosophy and the other is the indirect philosophy. Okay? Direct philosophy is to say something like, hey, you're cute, I wanted to talk to you. Who are you? That's pretty direct. Another more direct is, hey, you're fucking hot, I want you. That's extremely direct. And that could work sometimes too. Indirect is, hey, I need your opinion on something, blah, 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 blah. Or, wow, the music here is really good, and then keep talking, something like that, okay? Something that's not directly about you and her, not directly about sex, would be an indirect open. Now, which is better, direct or indirect? Trick question. Neither, okay? It depends on the situation. My personal philosophy, and one that I think is extremely effective and useful for me, and even more so for students, because the more that you're new in the game and the less calibrated you are, the more you need guidelines. The more you have experience, the less you need guidelines. But the guideline I like to follow and the guideline I teach students is go as direct as you can get away with, but no more direct. Okay? If you go too direct, you will turn the girl off. It's too obvious. You're asking for too much compliance. You're making the girl feel slutty if she goes along with you. So you don't want to be too direct. However, within that scope of what you can get away with, the more direct you are, the easier making every step of the interaction afterwards. Okay, so if you start out extremely indirect, you start out like talking about the weather, then you have to transition from talking about the weather to talking about something more intimate, and then from talking about something more intimate to bringing up man-to-woman conversation and like looking her in the eye and getting intense. Right? And then you have to like transition to getting physical. There's more transitions in there. There's more time spent. Whereas if you were able to get away with, hey, you're cute, I want to meet you, and she reacts positively to that, you've cut out a lot of the bullshit. You've cut out a lot of the wasted time. And especially in a high energy, intense environment, time is huge. Okay? You open a girl in, say, a loud nightclub, you only have a certain window of time before her friends are gonna like come find her or object, or there's gonna be some huge distraction that will drag her attention away. Okay, so time is your ally. Also, when you open more directly or when you do anything more directly, you're enhancing the intensity of everything that's going on, right? A more intense interaction is harder for the girl to leave. If you're eyeball to eyeball with a girl and like you're like giving her like the hot like sexy eyes and she's giving you the anime eyes and you're like pulling her hair, that's a pretty intense interaction for the girl. A little distraction over to the side, she probably won't even notice. But if you're talking about the weather and there's some little distraction, she's very likely to get distracted and to leave. Okay? So another reason why you want to be as direct as possible, one is to save time. The other is because the more intimate you are with the girl and the more intense the interaction, the less she will respond to distractions. And most of the time as you get good, you'll notice the girls you lose aren't because the girl didn't like you, but because of her friends or something going on in the club or some other stupid distraction. Okay, so that's the other advantage of going very direct, is the distractions are less meaningful. Okay, so that's why, in my opinion, you want to go as direct as you can get away with. Okay? Now, how do you know when you can go direct and when you can't? So whenever I see a set, I'm looking for how much compliance do I think I can get from them. Okay, compliance just means them changing what they're doing to suit your purpose, I suppose. It's a rough definition of compliance. So let's look at the extreme cases. Least compliance necessary set I can think of would be a girl sitting by herself at a table with nobody around. That's a no compliance situation, basically. Okay, you can walk up, and especially like if she has like a lot of like laptop and papers and all kinds of stuff scattered. It would be extremely hard for her to leave that situation. It would be a huge hassle. So you don't have to do much, right? You can go in and you can, even if you're pretty offensive, even if you're kind of obnoxious, even if she doesn't like you, the choice of having to move all that stuff is pretty loathsome to her, not something she really wants to do. So she's not gonna do that readily, right? So you can get away with a lot in that situation. That make sense? The epitome of the non-compliant situation would be girl in a chain of people that involves guys and girls in a loud nightclub getting physically dragged through, right? And possibly being led by bouncers and or hosts. That would be the extreme like non-compliant situation, right? If you go super direct in that situation, probably she's just not gonna hear it. She's like, nah, fuck off, whatever, and doesn't have time for it, will keep doing whatever she's doing, okay? Now, not to say that like going indirect is super great in that last situation either, it's just a tough situation. But the point is, it would be extremely, extremely slutty for her to drop everything she's doing in that mixed group situation where there's clear action going on and go with you, right? So you're asking for a lot there, okay? Generally, things that lead to a set that has a lot of compliance. If a girl's committed to a location, more likely to be compliant. If the girl seems bored or unoccupied, more likely to be compliant. If the girl seems happy, more likely to be compliant, okay? So like bored, happy, sitting alone, with like daydreaming is probably the most compliant situation ever, I guess. But so those are the things you're looking for though, okay? If the girl's moving, not as compliant. If the girl's with guys, not as compliant. If the girl's with a group that she seems very engaged with, not as compliant. If the girl is with a medium-sized group, very uncompliant. Like say like 2 to 3 to 4 girls, that's not a very compliant situation because she's with her friends, they're having kind of a tight conversation, it's gonna be hard to drag her out of that. If a girl's by herself, very compliant. Ironically, if a girl's with like 20 people, she might be very compliant. Because once you're with 20 or 10 or so, a lot of times you can drag the girl out of the group and she's not really missed. Or a lot of times the group's not quite as tight-knit and not quite as engaged with each other. So you can kind of treat the big set as though the girl's by herself. So a lot of times there you can actually go for compliance, okay? So these are some criteria for how you would look for getting compliance on the open. Right? And depending on the situation, you want to open in a different way. One situation that I'll make kind of special note of is for like an AMOG situation where the guy and the girl are together and actually seem to like each other. A lot of times direct really won't work because you'll just get like pushed away. Indirect might work a little bit, but the guy probably still kind of knows what you're doing. So I do a third kind of opener that I just kind of came up with, which is what I call the distraction opener. Which is I will find some sort of distracting thing in the environment and I'll draw attention to that as though it surprised me, and I'll use that as my reason for bumping into the set or my reason for having some kind of conversation. And then once I've physically come between the guy and the girl, then I'll reopen the girl a second time from that situation. So I do sort of like a 2-tiered opener because any opener I'm gonna do on a guy-girl set where they already like each other is probably gonna be met with immediate resistance. So I want to do something like a little psychotic or a little weird or a little just surprising to throw off that initial resistance and just get my foot in the door. So that's the extreme non-compliance situation, which is you have to do an open that doesn't even look like an open. But so you're looking for those compliance indicators. And then depending on them, you can open in different ways. Now again, you want to be as direct as possible. So if you can open it in a physical way, that's always better. However, if opening a physical way will immediately blow the set out, that's not good. Again, remember this sort of air diagram I'm gonna make, right? This is all the girls. These are the girls that are receptive to a particular move, okay? So could you open by walking up and making out with a girl? Absolutely yes. I've done it many times in my life. However, if your default open was to walk up and try and make out with every girl, only a very small percentage of girls are gonna go for that relative to the amount that would go for a different opener. Okay, so you don't want to narrow your scope so much that you only get a few girls coming through sort of you only catch a few girls in the net. Okay, however, you don't want to be so broad that you don't eliminate any girls. Actually, you don't want to be too perfect, and I'll get into that in a second. But you also don't want to be so non-threatening that you leave yourself too much work to do after the fact. And actually, it's better not to open 100%. Okay, if you open 100%. First of all, it's like a miracle. Congratulations, you've come up with some weird social glitch, so good for you. But you know what? It's not even gonna improve your game. That's the fucked up part of it. If you could open 100% of girls, it really probably wouldn't even improve your results in game very much. Because if you, say you go out in a night and every single girl opens for you and it's kind of lukewarm, it's like, oh, I'll tolerate this guy, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Right? And in order to open 100%, that's how you'd have to open. You can't open super direct and get it to 100%. Right? So you have to open a little bit weakly, a little bit indirectly. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna be spending a lot of your time with girls that are not that into you. You'll be spending a lot of time with girls that either are not down for something that night, are not receptive, you don't have immediate chemistry with, that sort of thing. Whereas if you got, say, 70% of the girls to open or 50% of the girls to open and they open much stronger, you would be immediately screening out a lot of the girls you don't want to be talking to anyway. And also, you would be screening out girls you have good chemistry with, and you would be closer right off the open to something happening, so you would waste less time in the sets you do open. Okay? So understand that ironically, that game that looks perfect, game that looks high percentage in terms of like getting through one stage, might not be the most high percentage in terms of getting you laid. If you want to get laid on a particular night, the way that you should do it is you should open very directly. Not so directly you're going to get rejected by every girl, but very directly. Probably like twice as direct as you normally would, whatever that means as far as a number. But you should open extremely directly and say the girl's either on or off right now. If the girl's on, stick in and try and make it work. If the girl's off, fine, next set. Boom, open directly. If it's on, good. If not, next set. Right? If you want to be efficient, that's a way to do it. We have a particular student in immersion who has a style very similar to that, and he'll do a lot of sets in a night. He'll probably do like, he tells me he averages 30 sets a night, which is a lot. I don't know if I even quite believe him on that number, but he also gets laid more than anyone in immersion. He does very, very well, and he sleeps with very hot girls as well. Okay? Why? Because he has a very good strategy for what he's doing. Right? Good strategy will oftentimes trump good technique. Strategy is absolutely paramount. Okay? So keep that in mind as well. So you want to do an open that is as direct as you can, but not too direct. That's the summary point. And you want to get physical if you can off the open, because it's going to make so many other things much, much easier. Okay? And the more intense the environment, the more important it is to get physical quickly, and the more you will get away with being physical off the opener. So if it's a loud dance club, there's a lot of social acceptance for being physical, so use that to your advantage. Get close early. And also, it's necessary to get physical because it's very hard to have a normal conversation from distance. It can be hard to make those transitions. In day game, it's going to be much less acceptable to open hyper physical, and also much less necessary, because you can have a normal conversation even from 5 feet, 10 feet away, and you can allow things to build gradually. In fact, in the daytime, it usually needs to build a little bit more gradually. Right? The metaphor for that, by the way, is this is something I got from as well. He says, like, did you ever play those sort of old school video games where you have to like push the button a lot and get a power level up to a certain amount before you can do something? Right? Now, if the power level starts really high versus really low, the process is still the same, which is just pushing that button as fast as you can, but it's a lot easier and there's a lot less time when the like download bar is kind of like already there, when it's like already very close. Does that make sense? So in night game, the physical arousal level is already there, so you can get away with being much more physical and you get a much better immediate return, whereas in day game it's much lower, so it's less necessary and it's just going to take longer. Okay? But that doesn't mean not to escalate. You're always escalating in every set, it's just you're starting in a different place. So day game, you start a little lower, it's a longer escalation in general, not always, in general, and night game, shorter escalation starting higher. Okay? Okay, so let's look at a couple specific openers. I say I'll do a straight up like verbal opener, and then I'll do claw, and then I'll do hand of God. All right? As sort of like a no compliance opener, a heavy compliance opener, and an in-between opener. Okay? So just walking up and having normal conversation. So I was gonna walk up, hey, what's up, how you doing?
Not too bad.
Not too bad? Cool. Nice smile.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness, you're trouble. Okay, so right here. So what have I done? I've walked up, I have decent eye contact, decent vibe. Actually probably wasn't as loud as I could have been, but it's a daytime environment, so don't need to like make a huge deal out of it, right? Quick point on volume, by the way. You want to be, first of all, loud enough to be heard and loud enough to get their attention, obviously, but you want to be a little louder than that. And the reason for that is, if I'm quiet and soft and trying not to be heard, if I'm like that, it seems fucking creepy. And there's a reason why it seems creepy, because it seems like if I'm talking to him that quietly, I'm afraid of you guys hearing. If I'm afraid of you guys hearing, that can sort of subcommunicates that what I'm doing is creepy or wrong or illegal in some way. Does that make sense? Because why does it have to be a secret if it's okay, right? But on the other hand, like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Loud enough that you guys could hear, what that's conveying sort of obliquely is, I'm okay with what I'm doing. I think what I'm doing is right and good, and so if I think that, she should too. Okay, so that's a quick word on volume. You want to be a little louder than necessary because it conveys that you think whatever's going on is normal and cool and acceptable. All right, so that's important. Okay, but so I did this open, this like very non-committal open. I actually showed some intent right after the open, which is good, right? I made it about him a little bit, so that's positive, right? Got in his, her head. But this is a set from what I did that would take a lot more work. I just basically barely got my foot in the door. I got a little bit of back and forth interaction, didn't get a lot going on. On the other hand, I'm actually just stand up for a second. Here's the, turn face, we'll blur you. Okay, so the next one you can do is the claw. This is the extreme physical compliance move, okay? So the claw basically is, hey, you, fucking cute, who are you, right? So I physically grab her and pull her over to me, all right? That's a lot more compliance. For a girl to say yes to that, for a girl to accept that, that's a lot more risky for her. It's a lot more potentially slutty for her, okay? So it's asking a lot of compliance. Now, a couple things on the claw. If you're, step. I'm gonna use you twice more. On the claw, first way you can mess up the claw is this. You'd be like, hey, come here, please come here, right? All right, if you're too soft on the claw, that's the same as what I just talked about with being too quiet on the open. It's conveying that you think you're doing something wrong. You're so afraid of offending, you're so afraid of making her uncomfortable, that you're gonna make her extremely uncomfortable, okay? Key component, key idea in game, anything you do to try and not be awkward will by its nature be awkward. If you're thinking in your head that you don't wanna be awkward, it's gonna be fucking awkward. If you're thinking in your head, I'm just doing this because I want to, I'm doing this because it's fun, I'm doing this because I'm the man, then it will not come off as awkward. So the first way to creepy claw is to like lightly like, The next way to creepy claw, and this is the opposite, is this. You, come here. Right? And you're like leaving like marks on the arm, okay? You don't want to do that either, all right? What you want to do is this combination of firm but light, firm but soft, okay? So it's like this. Firm, hey you, come here. And then notice my hands. This is very critical, right? Look, he could go. Take your hand away, it's okay. No, you can't go anywhere. But he feels like he could go. You see that? Go away. No, hey, no, you're so cute. Come here, right? So, but at the same time, it's not creepy, jaws of life grasping. Does it make sense? It feels comfortable, it feels safe. It's just as controlled as if you did that, but it's without feeling bad, without feeling awkward or creepy, all right? Because you're not asking for that same amount of compliance to her, like dealing with like forceful grip on the wrist. Okay, so those are the two ways to do the claw wrong. One is to not commit, the other is to be so creepy once you get it. So what you want is that sort of like assertiveness, but also that softness. And that's a metaphor for all of game, okay? In game, you should be leading, you should be assertive, but you should also be delicate and soft, and it should feel like they're not being forced into anything. Even if you're being massively manipulative, even if you're like orchestrating events and telling wizard stories, it should feel like it's just happening, okay? Okay, next one, and this is the in-between move, is the hand of God, okay? You. Who are you? Okay? Now, why is that different than the claw? What's the distinction between the claw and the hand of God? Yeah, it does and it doesn't, right? So on one level, it requires less compliance because it's less forceful and it's less slutty. On another level, it requires more compliance because you're getting feedback and a positive from them, okay? Remember the key premise of last minute resistance and of closing, which is that you want them to be participating. You're making that happen already when you do hand of God. The claw, it's very aggressive, and a lot of girls will be very turned on by the fact that you're being aggressive, but they haven't committed to it. They haven't made that logical decision, so they don't have to rationalize or justify to themselves that that happened. The other key distinction between the hand of God and the claw has to do not with the girl, but with the social group, with how it looks to the social group, okay? Imagine, to take the extreme example, imagine a girl with a bunch of guys. If you go in and you claw her like this, what are the guys likely to do? Are the guys likely to like take kindly to that? Are they likely to be happy about that? Yeah, not so much, right? They're likely to get kind of in your face. However, if on the other hand you do this one, hey, you. They might not like it, but she's participating, right? So it's much harder for them to object to you, much harder for them to have a problem or fight you. You can sit down now, thank you. And the same is true for a set of girls, just to a lesser degree, right? So the fact that you have a little bit of like feedback on it, you have her participating, it makes it better, makes it easier. So number one, it's less compliance, but the compliance you're getting is good compliance, right? So there's two kinds of compliance. There's the compliance of like they just didn't say no, or they just like sort of said no but went with it anyway. And then there's the compliance of them actually participating. And the second compliance is the one you really want. Don't get me wrong, the first one's good. The first one's much better than no compliance. But the second one, where they're participating, is what you actually want, okay? So that's an example of 3 different openers, different levels of compliance, okay? The extreme non-compliant opener would be something along the lines of the opinion opener. So say that you see a girl walking very fast on her phone, you don't think you'll be able to get any kind of compliance. If you're like, hey, you're cute, you know she's got big, she's probably like a hot girl that gets hit on a lot, whatever. In that case, I will concoct something a little fake in order to open. Only because I don't think they'll comply to anything less. So in that case, like, hey, I need your opinion on something really fast. Or hey, I need you for 1 second, I have to go, right? Or I'll say stuff like, I'll do false time constraint, I have to go in a second, but anyway. I'll give all these excuses and all these reasons why it's not as big of a deal. But then as soon as they stop and are focused on me, I'll immediately show up to be like, hey, you know what, actually, you're quite cute. Hi, nice to meet you. Again, going as direct as you can. Right? At the start, there was no compliance, so you couldn't go direct. Once there's some compliance, once you're in a conversation, switch it to direct, make something happen. Okay, so again, the concept is go as direct as you can, but not more so. Right? Also, if you ever catch yourself in a interaction that's going nowhere, you catch yourself in a situation where you're talking about the weather, or she's talking about her shoe collection, or some random bullshit gossip, understand that you can always open within a conversation as well as before the conversation. Like a lot of guys, when they learn pickup, they get comfortable going, hey, what's up, I wanted to talk to you. Or hey, what's up, I think you're cute. But then they get in a conversation and all of a sudden, excuse me, they feel like they have something to lose. They feel like because they're in a conversation, it's going relatively well, they're like, oh, I don't want to disturb this, I don't want to rock the boat. I'll just like cross my fingers and hope this goes in a good direction, right? No. Once you're in the conversation, you're in an even better place to open and get direct. So you're in that conversation that's going nowhere. Okay, whatever, just interrupt the girl or interrupt yourself. Be like, hey, you know what? You're actually quite cute. Or hey, you know what? I can't decide about you. There's something like very cute and very, like, I kind of want to crush on you, and there's something just very off-putting. I don't know, I'm just a little weirded out, right? You can jump into that at any moment. There's no reason not to. Conversation is not linear. Conversation, whenever you have a great conversation with your friends, those conversations where you stay up like all night talking and never get any sleep, the next day, if someone said, what did you talk about? Probably you couldn't give an exact specific answer because you talked about a lot of different topics and the conversation wasn't linear, okay? Good conversation isn't linear. Good conversation is not like a how-to manual, all right? It goes all over the place. Feel willing to interrupt, all right? Interrupt the girl. Also, so some guys are even willing to interrupt the girl, but almost nobody ever interrupts themselves. Say you're telling a story and the girl's attention is starting to drift in the middle of the story. How often do you continue the story anyway because you've already committed? Happens a lot. As soon as you notice that you don't have the attention, right? You're talking, yeah, so I grew up in Colorado and da-da-da-da-da. Hey, you know what? We should go check this out. This is amazing. Change the topic. Hey, you know what? There's something about you that's just a little off. I think you're very cute, but da-da-da. Change the topic, right? Anything. Make sense? Interrupt the girl, interrupt yourself. Don't tolerate an interaction that isn't going in the right way. Don't be linear. Think about, I'll give you a few models for how to think about an interaction. Okay, this is, a lot of people ask me like, what are you thinking during a set? What are you thinking during an interaction? Here are the models I use. And they're not exclusive, right? They fit nicely together. And sometimes you'll get different indicators on different models, in which case you have to actually use your intellect, use your judgment, and do the best you can, okay? But here are some models. First model is value versus comfort. There's this theory that in order to sleep with a girl, you need value plus comfort. Makes sense. Value means you have good genetics, you are like have enough success that you can support a child, support a girl, that sort of thing. Sure, makes sense, right? You have enough like people that respond to you or react to you in life, that you have a good social network. That would make sense in a tribal sort of area in terms of passing your genes along. So that's value. Value is you're a badass. Comfort is she can participate in your badassness. Right? If you're a total badass, but you have no care for her and you just like slap her away or you'll just fuck her and leave, that's also not as useful to her in a tribal setting, okay? So it's a combination value plus comfort. At any moment in the interaction, the girl needs either more value or more comfort from you, right? If she had the exact perfect ratio, your penis would be inside of her, right? If it's actually perfect ratio and amounts, right? So what you need are both. In order to sleep with a girl, you need a certain amount of value, a certain amount of comfort, and you need a proper ratio. If you have those three things, you can have sex with her. If you don't have those three things, you have some work to do, right? Interesting thing is that as long as the ratio is kind of maintained, she'll allow you time to build up the levels. But if the ratio gets too out of whack, the interaction is over. Okay, so if you're all value and no comfort, she will not trust you. She'll be very stimulated by you. She'll be giggling with you, giggling at everything you say. She might even be making out with you. She might even be like escalating on you. And then the next minute she's like, that was fun, bye. You guys ever get that in the club? Girl makes out with you, seems totally on, and then the second there's any remote pause, she's just gone. Why is that? All value, no comfort. Massively stimulated, emotions running through her body, but she doesn't trust you. She also hasn't associated that stimulus with you. She's just associating it with fun night. Okay? So that's too much value, not enough comfort. Too much comfort, not enough value looks like you are talking with a girl for a while, you get to know all her like deep-seated secrets, and then you try and make a move, and she's like, no, I just don't see you that way. No, you're like my brother, right? That's too much comfort, not enough value, okay? Does that make sense? Or too much comfort, not enough value is where the girl will continue the interaction with you, but she'll only continue it by asking you for things over and over and over again, and as long as you start buying her things or providing for her, then she'll continue the interaction. That's also too much value. Too much comfort, not enough value. I hope I said that the right way the first time. But yeah, that'd be too much comfort, not enough value. Make sense? So you can go wrong with either ratio. As long as the ratio is roughly correct, you have time to then build both up. Okay, so that's value comfort. That's one model for how to look at an interaction. Next model, social capital. Social capital basically is the idea that at any given point in the interaction, there are certain things you can get away with and certain things you can't. So, say that you've met someone for 5 minutes, and in that first 5 minutes they do something that really pisses you off. That interaction is probably done. However, say that you've known someone for 6 months and been great friends with them for 6 months, and then they do something that pisses you off. That's probably just going to be a little fight. You'll talk it out the next day, you'll get over it, and you'll move on. Okay? So the same action, the same situation is different with different people because you have different levels of investment. Okay? Typically, the more that you know someone, the longer you've known someone, the more social capital they have. The more that you have shared experiences, the more social capital they have. And here's an interesting one. The more things that you've complied to with that person, the more social capital they have. Does that make sense? Okay? That last one's absolutely huge because it explains how to use social capital as well as what it is. Okay, so let's say that you are talking to a girl and it's going pretty well. So you decide to escalate. You decide to go for a light escalation, you reach out, try and take her hand. And let's say that she rejects your advance. Okay, so what's happened there in terms of social capital? You basically looked at the situation and said, I think I have enough social capital to try this move. I think there's a decent chance this will work. And she said, no, you don't have that much social capital. And on top of that, in having tried to escalate, you tried to spend some social capital, right? And when you do that, you decrease it. Okay, it's like there's like a penalty for trying, right? You tried to spend some social capital, you got rejected, okay, now your social capital is even lower. So before you want to try again, you want to take some time, build some more social capital up before you would try something like that again. On the other hand, if you go for that move and she complies and she starts holding hands with you, now she's made a big commitment to you. Now your social capital goes way, way, way up. Okay? So what you want to do in escalation is you want to be escalating because escalating is about the fastest way to build social capital if it's received well. However, it's a good way to destroy social capital if it's received poorly. So it's absolutely essential that you escalate. You're not going to get the set to go well. You're not going to get the set to move forward without pushing and without escalating. But you have to be smart about it because if you're dumb about it, you'll also burn the set to the ground. So that's the idea with social capital. And that's the same with physical escalation, verbal escalation, logistical escalation. Actually, this is another topic, real fast. I'll throw this out. There are basically 4 types of escalation in the set. Okay? Physical escalation, basically getting more physical, getting closer to sex. Verbal escalation, which is saying things that are risque or sexual or that show a lot of intent or show a lot of man to woman verbally, right? The difference between talking about the weather to talking about how you'd like to fuck her behind a dumpster, that's a verbal escalation, okay? Is great with this. He has this whole stack where he starts with you seem quite fashionable. Are you a fashion person? Which is almost no intent whatsoever. And then it ends all the way up to I'd like to finger you with my penis, right? So he goes the whole range, and it's a gradual escalation. Okay, so that's verbal escalation. Next one is logistical escalation, getting closer to a place where sex can happen. You start out, say, in a club, talking in a crowded area, then you take her over to against the bar where it's less crowded. Then maybe you go sit down with her where you're more closely together. Then you take her outside of the club, and then you take her to a place where seduction can happen, where things could go down between the two of you. All right? So that's logistical escalation. And the last one is topical escalation. Changing the conversation topic. Not necessarily conveying direct interest in her, but changing the topic to a more sexual topic and changing the nature of the conversation from I and you to we. So instead of there's you and me as separate entities to this idea of you and me together. That's topical escalation. All right? So at any point in the interaction, you can be escalating on any of these 4 levels. All right? And you don't necessarily need to be escalating all the time on one of them. It's okay if the physical escalation stays stagnant for even a long time, as long as you're escalating on the other levels. It's okay if you're talking about I and you for a long time, but you're getting very physical, right? As long as there's some escalation on one of these topics, you're probably in pretty good shape. Now, the one caution is you don't want to escalate one topic so much more than the others that it gets weird, because that goes back to the value comfort thing. So that's a lot on escalation, a lot on social capital, and a lot on how that works. So that's a second model that I'm considering at any time in the interaction. And then the last model I consider, and this isn't really a model, but it's sort of a check that I do, because these are the things I think about in set. At any time in the set, I'm thinking does this girl need more value or more comfort? And that's going to dictate my actions. Second thing I'm thinking is, where am I at social capital-wise? Do I have a lot of social capital? Should I be spending it and trying to escalate? Or am I in kind of icy water and I need to really offer some value and not ask for a lot, right? If that's the case, then I won't spend it. And then the last model I have for myself is, to what extent am I acting through my own purpose? Okay, now this one's a little more nebulous, but what you should ask yourself is, are you saying the things you want to say or the things you think she wants to hear? Because as soon as you're micromanaging and trying to think ahead to what she wants to hear, you're not going to be as charismatic, or you're not going to be as smooth, and a lot of your little physical mannerisms are going to start to get worse. So, quick little sort of story. When we first started teaching pickup, we had this list, something posted years and years ago. It's called the 25 points. It's called the 25 things that he most commonly saw people do wrong that would blow them out with girls. And it was things like not taking up any space when they talk, right? Being seeming nervous, or talking in a low tone of voice, or constantly leaning into the girl at everything she says, things like that. And the interesting thing was, when he'd see guys doing these things, there was a huge direct correlation to when they did these things, the girls didn't like them and they didn't get the girls. So he made this list, 25 things that you should not do when talking to girls. And we used to teach boot camp, we'd start teaching that 25 points. We'd say, these are the 25 things not to do. Just don't do any of these things and you're good. Problem was, when you give guys a list of 25 things not to do, they start thinking about them and micromanaging them and trying not to do them, and they will do them, every single one of them, more than you've ever seen. Because the core reason why they were doing the 25 things was because of insecurity or nervousness. Right? And making them think about their body language and their tone of voice and all that kind of stuff, what did it do? It made them nervous and insecure. So then we flipped it around and we said, okay, forget it, we're not teaching that anymore. And instead we taught, have the right attitude, be the man, offer value, that kind of stuff, and come from a non-needy frame and different ways to do it. And funny enough, we weren't even thinking about the 25 points anymore, but once people started doing it, they stopped doing all those 25 point things wrong because they got the right intention, right? So acting through your own intention is equivalent to getting the attitude right to avoid the 25 points, okay? So whenever I notice myself trying to think, what does she want to hear? I will cut it off and I will change the topic to something else that's irrelevant to that, or even that's the opposite of that, okay? Or as soon as I find myself, this happens a lot for me because I've been in pickup for 14 years. As soon as I find myself saying some pickup line or routine that I've said a million times before, and halfway through it I'm getting bored, as soon as I'm getting bored, even if technically I should finish the routine, the right thing for me to do is to cut it off and say something I'm engaged in at that moment. Because even though the technical game is less good that way, I will be coming through in a more congruent way. I'll be coming through in a more confident way, in a way that's in alignment with the idea of you are enough. And that's more important than whatever you're saying, right? Where it's coming from is always the more important thing. Okay, so those are some of the models that I always look at when I'm in game. And basically, anytime I lose a set, I mean, there are the extreme sets. There's the like her boyfriend comes out of nowhere and you had no idea kind of sets. But anytime you lose a set due to the girl's emotions dwindling or that sort of thing, basically you can probably chalk it up to one of those three. You either messed up on value comfort, you messed up on social capital, or you're not expressing through your own intention, right? And part of expressing through your own intention, you could add a fourth model if you're fairly newbie, which is, are you being man to woman or are you escalating? Right? For me, I don't think about that because escalation is a very foregone conclusion. And for me, if I'm acting through my own intention, I'm going to escalate naturally. But if you need a fourth model, if you're fairly new and you have escalation issues, add that one too, which is, am I escalating? Am I being man to woman? Am I escalating? Right? If you do those four things properly, it's pretty hard to fuck up a set. That said, it's not easy to do all four of those things properly, which is why we're all here. Right? But those are good models. And by having those models, when you have good sets, now you can look at them and know what went well and how to repeat it. And when you have bad sets, you can look at it and know what to correct. Okay? So those are the four models you could look at. Okay. Any quick questions on the opening phase? Yeah?
Do you ever actually use numbers?
Yes. Kind of. I don't use full opinion openers anymore, but I will use, hey, I need your opinion on something to get the girl to stop, and then I'll transition into what I actually want to say. I did use opinion openers for years, and I still remember some, but if I wanted to use one, it would come off so clunky right now because it's been so long that I probably wouldn't do it. But I do use the phrase, hey, I need your opinion on something, or hey, I need you for a second, as just a reason to give them an excuse to stop and a premise for the conversation.
Right.
So I'll use that extent of it, but I don't use the full opener anymore. Yeah?
So when you're in really loud clubs like Hakkasan or light, how does your opening change, especially when you're really loud areas of the club?
So a few things will happen. The urgency will increase and the volume will increase. Like I'll talk louder and I'll be more urgent in what I'm doing. I will be, I'll have the idea in my head of going extremely direct if possible, because your opening percentage is going to be lower there in general because of the environment. Your opening percentage is going to be less dictated by what you're bringing to it and more dictated by the environment. So if you look at again this big, like this is all the girls and these are the girls you're going to open, the amount you're going to open is already very small. So if you choose an opener that's encompassing all of this, you're still not getting all of this, you're still just getting that one limited amount. Does that make sense? So you want to calibrate your opener so that your opener is also targeted to that same limited amount that the environment's giving you. Does that make sense? So
you go more physical?
I would go more physical and more direct, and I would also be very persistent. Here's a very key thing on the opener. I'm glad you brought that up. It's unrelated kind of, but it's very important. Persistence on the opener is absolutely huge, especially with the hottest girls and in the toughest environments. Hey.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Whoa, okay. That was a little, hey, whoa, hold on. That was a little extreme. Hi there, I'm sorry, hi, nice to meet you.
Oh my.
There you are.
Okay, we'll give you your number.
Okay, well, we'll do that.
What's your name?
Todd.
Nice to meet you, Todd. 860.
Okay, most of the time with the hottest girls, when I open them, I probably don't get a great open off the first word I say. But on being persistent and doing a secondary opener, I will get a good reaction. In fact, a lot of hot girls that I end up like sleeping with blow me off initially on the open. One of the hottest girls I've ever slept with, from the story of the girls that I slept with without kissing them, she was like 5'11" in flats, and I'm like 5'7"-ish. So I walked up and her literally first words out of her mouth to me is, "You're too short, that's a deal breaker for me, sorry." Like literally, that's first words out of her mouth, right? And I ended up sleeping with her. But why is that? It's because on that first little bit, I didn't just take and go, okay, sorry, tail between my legs, goodbye. I pushed through, and I knew that it was bullshit. I know that that's some bullshit societal construct, and I just pushed through it, right? And I did a misinterpretation. I basically said like, oh, I'm too short for what? That's so sweet. But I just wanted to talk. I don't want to get physical with you, like get sexual yet. You're so silly, boom, boom, boom. And just kept talking, right? Something along those lines. And I just kept going. But here's the metaphor for that I really like. Have any of you guys, if you guys are ever in like New York or LA, this will happen a bit, sometimes Miami. There's sort of different tiers of clubs, different levels of clubs. There's the club that like everybody can get into. There's the club that like is super retardedly exclusive and you need to be on the list even if you're somebody. Like they'll turn away celebrities sometimes even if you're not on the list. There's that level of club. And then there's like that in the middle club where they're trying to be exclusive, but they're not really that exclusive. Now, what I'm gonna talk to you about is that last type of club, the like exclusive-ish, but not totally exclusive club. So they do this a lot in like New York or LA. They'll have a club, they'll have like a little velvet rope and they'll have a bouncer outside. And if you're a group of guys and you walk up, they'll be like, are you on the guest list? And most guys, they go, oh no. And they walk away and they just turn and like saunter off into the night feeling they're unworthy of the club. All right? When I go up to that club, I walk up and they go, are you on the guest list? I go, nope, just me. I just look them in the eye like I deserve to be there. And most of the time, I mean, if it's not the like super high-end club that celebrities don't get into or that you have to be on the guest list, those I get turned away too. But if it's those like intermediate clubs, most of the time, they actually just let me straight in. Why? It's because I seem like I deserve to be there. I have a theory that like the whole guest list thing either doesn't exist or like barely exists. It exists for like some special, like you can sit at this place or whatever, but like it really doesn't even exist. But the club owner is just smart and he realizes the best way to keep the wrong kind of guys out of a club that you don't want in a club is to do exactly that. And just put up one little tiny barrier of resistance. And anybody who doesn't feel worthy to step through that one barrier, they don't deserve to be in that club. Fuck them. They're not the people you want. Same thing with a girl. If you go say hi to a girl and she goes, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm unworthy, I tried, right? Good, she just screened you. That's the most efficient screen a girl could possibly have. But the guy who like believes in himself, me, right? I tap them, they turn away like, no, hey, yeah, I know I seem unattainable, but I'm actually just being sweet. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Todd. Hi, right? A lot of times like, oh, hi, so sorry, yeah, hi, nice to meet you, you're very cute, right? And it immediately turns around. Why? Because I showed an honest signal that I'm entitled. Right? Honest signal is I pushed the resistance and went anyway. Now, if you do this like 6 times off, fuck you, I'm gonna get the bouncer, I'm gonna kill you, then that's a little bit much. Then that's a little socio. But like to go like that second time is very important. Okay? It's very important to show enough entitlement to say, no, hey, I know what you're doing, I understand, but no, I'm me. Todd, nice to meet you. Right? That's very critical. Okay, to have that persistence. That's another point on the open. One of the first resources I ever found on game was a book on conversation. It's called Making People Talk by Barry Farber. It's actually a really good book. It's out of print, I believe, but it's a very good book. And basically the premise of that book was he's like a radio host or a radio interviewer back in the day when radio was the big medium. And he'd get people on his show and he has to make them talk. He has to not only like people, you know, they seem very articulate, they seem like they have a lot to say, they get on the show and they get nervous, they clam up, they don't want to talk, they don't know what to say. And he's stuck on the air with them for half an hour and he better make them talk and he better make it interesting because otherwise he's out of a job. Right? So he talked about the techniques he learned in doing that over the course of many, many years. And one of the big things he said for starting a conversation is, one of his rules was assume the burden of the conversation. Right? Assume that at least at the start it's on your shoulders to make something happen, it's on your shoulders to put something out there because they probably won't. And even if they're capable of it, you can't trust that they're capable of it. So you have to like for the first little bit, you have to kind of start the engine. Once the engine's going, you can you know let it run, but you have to start the engine. Metaphor for that is if any of you guys ever had like those old lawnmowers, actually probably not that old, but like where they have like the choke and like you pull the choke and it kind of like and then dies. And then you pull the choke in and then it dies. And then eventually on like the 3rd one or the 4th one, for no apparent reason, like it's warm enough now or something and it works, right? It can be like that a lot of times for the conversation. And it's not like you should take it personally. Like if you pull a lawnmower and it doesn't work, you're like, you fucking lawnmower, why do you hate me? What is this fucking, you cunt, right? It's not like that. It's just the lawnmower's being a lawnmower, right? And sometimes you gotta pull it a couple times. It's the same thing with a girl, right? Sometimes you gotta start the conversation a couple times before it really kicks in, right? So you keep throwing different stuff against the wall and trying to see what works. When you are persistent, this is another point, you wanna try and be persistent in different ways. Don't try the same approach over and over and over again when you get a rejection on it. So you're like, hey, I think you're cute. Okay, she doesn't respond well to that. Okay, hey, you know what's funny? I have to go in a second, but I need your opinion on something. Okay, maybe she'll respond to that. But you know what the funniest thing happened to me the other day? I fucking hate you. Oh my God, that's the cutest look I've ever seen. Do you know what's interesting about you? Right? All these different things, all these different types of opens that you could cycle through. If you're getting a rejection on one, you don't keep hitting up the same one. You don't go, you're cute. No, but you're adorable. But I love you, right? If that structure is not working, drop the structure, try a different one. If you're like, hey, I need your opinion. No, I need to ask you something. No, like my friends and I, we want to, no, don't do that. You just keep cycling through and you try and find the particular blueprint for the particular girl you're going after, right? And the great thing is, once you figure out that blueprint, then you can keep using it over and over and over again, and you kind of like, you're inside her head. Right? So that's what we're going to find. You want to find the system or the blueprint of things that work on that particular girl. Yeah?
Okay, so say you open with you're cute and you get that. Well, opinion, I hate you, and then she goes, like, turns around, how would you go from there? Would you like go down that line? Or just like start asking her questions? Or
Okay, so if I got that, if I got the I hate you and it works, I wouldn't like keep hammering on that button so much. You could maybe hit it one more time if you think it would like spike it up one more time. And then I would go into a more normal conversation. Like, yeah, see, I know you. I understand you're that type of girl, right? Which isn't quite I hate you. It's a different little vibe off of it, but it's using the I hate you. And then I would catalog in the back of my head, I'd call her like a polar responder, right? She responds to a negative pole. So if you ever lose her attention, negative pole could work. You don't want to overuse it though. You don't want to become so obvious that you're just obviously pushing that button. So you don't want to make a whole interaction out of insulting her. You just want to spice it in at times throughout the interaction. And ideally, the real like holy grail is like if you can get 2 or 3 of them, if you have 2 or 3 different things, then you can do them, and you can do them a lot. You can keep hitting the button and it's not predictable because you have a few different buttons. So that's like the ideal one. But yeah, so I would keep that. I would use it. Try and hit hard off of it and use the sort of foot in the door that you got to leverage into a normal conversation. But then I'd catalog in the back of my head, that girl responds to that. So if I ever need it, that's how you act. That's how you deal with that girl. I had one girl in particular. Basically, this girl said one sentence. And from that one sentence, I was able to pretty much like dissect her life and know exactly how to game her. And that sentence is a very innocuous sentence. But she said, no, I'm actually average height for an American woman. Right? And you wouldn't think that that's like a sentence that tells you so much about like a girl, but like to me, because I've like dealt with so many girls, I looked at that sentence and I completely understood this girl from that sentence. And from there, everything I did, I could, based on that, like basically know exactly how to game her, right? So what does that sentence say? Just to dissect it, right? Average height for an American woman. Oh no, actually, I'm average height for an American woman. Okay, so she is somewhat educated. She didn't say no, I'm average or no, I'm normal height, something like that. She's from an educated background. She probably has studied some level of math and statistics in her life, we would guess. She is deriving value from fitting in and value from other people's perception of her. Okay? Does that make sense? To say I'm average height as a qualifier of herself. Right? So it means that she derives value from being part of a group, and she's saying that by obliquely saying that, she's saying when I have been part of a group, I have been in a good situation. I have been someone high value within the group because that's why I identify with the group. Make sense? So now we're looking at someone who likes to fit in, is pretty educated, probably did well in school, probably is relatively smart, probably went to good schools, but probably is not like actually like genius level, but works very hard. That's my like assessment on all of that. Right? Now the N also derives a lot of her validation from being perceived of as smart. Right? Now that you know all this, you have a lot to work with. And so by having all that information, I was able to basically sort of like subtly help and undermine at the same time and have a great interaction with her where it was very emotionally relevant. And actually my first response to that was to completely flip it on its head. I said, actually, no, if you're average in any way, we're not gonna get along. I only deal with exceptional people, right? It just completely like ruined her worldview. She's like, what the fuck, right? So I basically like undid her worldview in one sentence and like put her on her heels, and then I was able to control the interaction from there. Does that make sense? So that's one example. That's a sort of an esoteric example of taking one sentence and understanding a girl very completely from it. But it's a lot easier to take something like how she responds to I love you or I hate you, or how she responds to physical touch, and understand that. Another one, I had a 11-minute pull to one of the cabanas here in Surrender. And how I knew I could do that one so fast was because of the way she responded to physicality. Right? She responded to physicality in a certain way. And so once I saw that response, I didn't have to talk to her very much. I had almost the entire conversation, the entire interaction on an extremely physical level from her, and just took the communication there. And because it was that kind of interaction, it was able to escalate very quickly. I ended up having sex with her in 11 minutes in the club. Right? So again, you find the blueprint and you act on that blueprint. It would be silly once you find the girl's very responsive to that physical touch to start trying to discuss like philosophy with her. It's just silly. You can do that after sex if you want to, but play to what you're given. Okay, so that's a little bit on blueprints as well. All right, yeah, one more question on.
What do you actually open the group versus opening a single girl?
I heard opening the group and opening it. How did that question start?
Just curious, when you see a bunch of girls, does it make sense to open all of them at once? Or?
That's a good question. Actually, something I should have addressed. It depends. It completely depends. And a big part of that is the size of the group, and a big part of that is how engaged the group is with each other. Okay, so if it's a group of like 2, 3, or 4, and they seem pretty engaged, you probably need to open the whole group. Does that make sense? Because that's, again, you could take the metaphor, that's a low compliance situation, right? They're not likely to give you a lot of compliance, okay? So if you go in and just open the one and try and pull her out, the girls will be like, what the fuck, we're talking to her. And they're gonna be resistant. So you avoid that resistance by talking to the whole group. If it's a bigger group, like a group of 10, and she seems kind of like sort of off to the side, her body language isn't turned towards the group, that sort of thing, in that case, then it's much more likely you can get compliance by going directly on her, and you should go directly on her, because by doing that you can go more direct. So that's the principle of go as direct as you can, okay? However, if you do go direct on the girl, you should be very aware of what's going on around you. So if you grab the one girl, then you want to be aware of where the group is, so that as soon as there's any kind of resistance, before they come to you and resist you, you're going to them. But as soon as you get the vibe that she likes you, then there's 2 priorities, right? The girl is the group, and the group is the girl. Okay, so there's on one level, you need the girl to be into you, to go somewhere with you. On the other level, you need the group to permit it. Even if the girl really likes you, and actually even especially if the girl really likes you, the group might get resistant. As soon as you know she's really on, the next thing you should be thinking isn't how do I make her more on, because she's on enough. You should be thinking, how do I make sure that I don't get in trouble for what I'm about to do? The other one is if they give you some sort of indicator before you open. Right, if they look at you a particular way or like engage with you from a distance before you open, that's a good indicator that there's gonna be more compliance there, so then you can open directly, but then you'd want to, again, engage the group quickly to disarm whatever might happen. Right? The other thing that you should consider too is you don't have to like, this is interesting logistically, you don't have to turn yourself into the group so that your back's to the group and she's outside the group. You can get isolation just as easily by turning her and being outside the group as well. I wouldn't grab or pull. I would sort of subtly nudge and let my body language dictate. So instead of, you wanna stand up one more time? Okay, so say that we're like this, okay? Biggest girl ever. Okay, so say that we're like this and I'd like him to turn, right? Now I could try and be like this, but that's a little overt, and it's a little try hard, it's sort of like clunky, right? You could do it, and he actually turned very nicely and easily, thankfully, but.
Grabbing him by the shoulders.
Right, and that's also still, it's very like overt, right? Instead, what I would probably do is, so I'm here, I would just be like, hey, right?
Oh, yeah.
How much easier is that? Just a little tap and a nudge and just indicate with your body what you're saying, right? Much more subtle, much less invasive, right? And then if she doesn't do that, if she doesn't comply, right? If you do this and she doesn't comply, it's fucking awkward, right? But if you go like this and she doesn't comply, you're just talking, it's no big deal. Right? So that's another key component with physicality. Actually, I'll make that my next topic. Another key component with physicality, you want to escalate in such a way that you have free reign to escalate, but not in such a way that the no sucks. Right? Again, key component to all of this, we're trying to avoid as many hard no's as possible. Okay? So you have to escalate. You must escalate. Any of you who are not escalating enough, fucking start escalating. But you want to escalate in such a way that you don't get a lot of no's. Okay, so again, hand of God versus claw. The other one that I'll do is, for example, I'll walk up to a girl and say that like I'm saying hi to her. And I could shake her hand, or I could just talk, or I could try and hug her, right? A lot of guys will either just stay and talk because it's like safer, or they'll just shake the hand because it's safe, or what they'll do is they'll go for the hug very overtly. And that's like the opposite spectrum. What I do is I'm talking to her, I'm like, hey, what's up? And I'll put my hand out like this, just as a gesture. But it's sort of like inviting her in, and I'll kind of turn my body as though to hug her. And then if she comes into the hug, I hug her. If she doesn't come into the hug, I just drop it and go to talking. Does that make sense? So I essentially made the same effort to hug her as the guy who like gropes her, and I gave myself the same chances of the hug working, but when it doesn't work, she doesn't know it didn't work. She's not aware that I made an attempt, and there was no hard no. So it's a no-risk plan. Hi, red hair, who are you? My name is Todd, you're adorable. Make sense? So I'm doing all these no-risk escalations. Another one is like, if I want to hold her hands or whatever, I'll just sort of like tap the bottom of her hands real lightly as I'm talking. Just tap, tap. It's like she almost doesn't even know what happened. Like she knows subconsciously, and most of the time she'll just take my hands, and now we're holding hands. I can do like hand clasp, different things like that. But if she doesn't, we're still talking, there's still other things going on. I just understand that that was a no for now, but it wasn't a big deal made out of it. Okay? So that's what I'm constantly doing, is I'm constantly escalating. Constantly. If you guys ever see me in, well, you're gonna see me in set, but when you see me in set, I'm escalating much of the time. But I'm escalating in such ways that if it's rejected, it's not a big deal. All right, so let's talk about the hook. Basically, the hook has always been kind of an interesting phase in game. A lot of guys are like, you know, I can't get the set to hook, or sometimes it hooks, sometimes it doesn't. It's always like very nebulous. It's like, you know, sometimes it's on, sometimes it's not. I can't really figure it out. I know that when I'm more self-amusing, it hooks, right? The more I'm having fun and not asking for something from her, that helps it hook. That tends to be a correlation a lot of people have. Or I know when I'm in state, it hooks more. Okay, fair enough. But those aren't really things that are that easily controlled, right? It's hard to control like, okay, I need to hook the set, so I better get into state right now. Let me get into state right now. It doesn't work like that. You can't control that. You can't overtly do something about that. Or you can't control like if the initial reaction's good, you hook, and if the initial reaction's bad, you don't hook. Well, that initial reaction, there's only so much you can do about it, right? So ideally, sets will hook without you having to think about them. That's perfect. Perfect is when you open and they just like insta hook for you. Or you just start self-amusing and the girl starts committing and starts chasing you. That's great when it happens. However, most of the time, especially with hot girls, especially with difficult sets, that's not gonna happen. And so with that said, I've been thinking about it for a really long time, and I finally have come up with a structure for exactly how the hook occurs. And the way this happened was I had a student who, he was one of the students at Immersion, and he brought some different video to me. Like we'd filmed him, and he brought these like different situations where he's trying to open a girl, and he wasn't getting the hook in any of the situations. And he's like, I can't get the hook. Can you explain to me why? And so the first situation, I was like, okay, so here you're trying for too much compliance. And that's why you didn't get it. So okay, then maybe that's your problem. Then the next time I'm like, well, okay, so here you're actually not escalating at all. You're not asking for any compliance. So that's a complete contradiction to what I just taught you. But I'm seeing it, and I know the reason why you didn't get the hook here is because you're not trying for compliance here, right? And then the next one, I'm like, he's watching it, and I'm like, yeah, so here you're just talking about, I mean, you're trying to escalate and everything, like sort of physically and whatnot, but you're just talking about like random topics. It's not about you and her on any level. It's just this like nebulous conversation, right? And so now we have 3 different sets that didn't hook, and then for 3 completely different reasons that totally contradict each other. And so I'm sitting here trying to explain it to him, like, well, see, in this one you did this, and this one you did, and so the principle is, fuck, right? And so I really sat there for a minute and tried to break it down. And I was like, well, okay, what's really happening here is that in this one you got to a certain place in the hook, and then it failed. In this one you got to a certain place in the hook, and then it failed. In this you got to a different place, and then it failed. And so what I realized is the hook isn't like a distinct one thing that happens. There's sort of phases to the hook. And when you understand that, you can understand how all these different sorts of failures are all failure to hook at the same time, and how they all contribute, okay? And so we're gonna break that down for you. I came up with a model for hooking. So the Fred model for hooking. Basically, here's how it works. First step, focus. You must have her focus in order to hook. If you don't have her attention, you will not get her hooked. Okay? Focus. Next one, relevance. Okay? You must make it relevant to her. If you're talking about nebulous topics, you are not going to hook her into that idea. You're not going to hook her into a conversation that means nothing to her. You must make it meaningful to her. Okay? Next, emotion. It must not just be theoretically meaningful to her. There must be some emotional involvement or emotional impact. She has to have commitment. She has to have some chemicals running through her body. Okay? And then lastly is decision. Focus, relevance, emotion, decision. Fred. Okay? We're thinking about putting, like, during hot seat, literally to like some like old fat guy on stage and be like, this is Fred. This works even for him. But anyway, so that's the Fred method, okay? Focus, relevance, emotion, decision. Focus basically means when you open, you need to get her attention. You need her attention on you. And if you have lost her attention, rather than trying other things to get the hook, the first thing to do is get her attention back. Fundamental to everything you do in game, you must have her attention. If you don't have her attention, you are not gaming her. You are not doing well. And I'm going to show you guys an AMOG set later on where you'll see this extraordinarily clearly, where the girl likes another guy way more than she likes me, but I take her attention. And I put him in a situation where he has to do something awkward if he's going to get it back. And just by having attention, even though she doesn't like me yet, she likes him, I have the upper hand all of a sudden because of that simple thing of attention, all right? Attention is paramount. Open strong, open hard, make sure you have the attention. Secondly, if you lose the attention, don't tolerate being in a conversation where she's all over the place not paying attention to you, okay? Now, this doesn't mean be completely anal retentive about it either, okay? If you're talking with a girl for a long time, she likes you, and then she's over at the bar and she wants to go grab a quick drink with her friend, like you're sitting by the bar, she wants to turn and order a drink, and she's talking to her friend, you can let her talk to the friend while ordering the drink and trust that she'll come back to you in a minute, right? Because there's a specific process, there's a start and an end to that task, and when the task is over, then at that point you can be like, hey, and grab her attention back, grab her focus back. Does that make sense? You don't have to have her focus every single moment, but what you do have to do is you have to have an idea of where her focus is at and how you're gonna get it back and when you're gonna get it back. Does that make sense? If you don't have her focus, you're not gaming at that moment. Focus is paramount. Okay, next, relevance. What is relevant? What is relevant to someone? Anything. What things are relevant? What things do you care about in your life?
Yourself.
Yourself, yes, that's a very good example. Here's what you care about. Here's what gets a reaction from you, and here's what you focus on, actually. But here's what gets a reaction from you. You get a reaction, or you give a reaction to things that you perceive of as value or threat. If you perceive of something as having value, you will pay attention to it. It's relevant to you. If you perceive it as a threat, it's relevant to you. This goes back to the jungles, right? If we see food, that's value. That makes us survive. If we see a resource that we can turn into tools, that's value. It's relevant to us. It has meaning to us, all right? If we see a predator, that's a threat. That has meaning to us. Or if we see some guy is like getting angry, is probably going to fight us, that's a threat. That's relevant to us, okay? Those are relevant. Things that are value or a threat are relevant. And so why are ourselves relevant? Information about ourselves? Because information about ourselves is by its nature usually either of value or a threat. If we can understand how the world perceives us, we can utilize that information to either have more success or to avoid failure, right? So that's what we're looking for. You want to become value or threat. So how can you do this? Well, a couple different ways. You can become valuable to someone by having some sort of insight about them. That's one very good shortcut, right? You know what I noticed about you that's so interesting? Boom, all of a sudden you have value, right? Because they want to know. Even if they don't like you, even if they don't know you yet, the fact that you are making it about them, there's some value there, okay? You want an example of threat? Dog, slut, that's a threat. I hate you, that's a threat. Make sense? That's a threat to their ego, that's a threat to their self-esteem, that's a threat to their social perception. Right? That's another way to get their attention. That's another way to get them more invested in the interaction, right? Is by making a threat. So what you want to do once you have their attention is very early on, do something that's either of value or threat, okay? Value doesn't necessarily always have to be about them. If you have something interesting to teach them in general, for example, if you were an expert on a particular subject and they had some interest in that subject, that could be interesting too. A lot of guys do very well by becoming the teacher role, right? Becoming the teacher role of, I can teach you something about humanity, I can teach you something about business, I can teach you something about making money, I can teach you something about whatever, right? I can teach you how to play the guitar, whatever. If you have some other form of value, that's fine too. It doesn't necessarily have to be about them, but because you don't know the person you're dealing with well on a cold approach, usually a good shortcut is to think that about them is a likely scenario, okay? So you want to do that. Make it what we call ad hominem, make it about them, whether of threat or of value. Make sense? So that's the next stage. And that's where you get into things like a lot of my interactions will be either like an immediate push-pull statement, like I like you but I hate you, or there's something about you I like, there's something about you I'm not sure, or your vibe is very interesting, something like that. It's something that's a little bit of a cold read, something that's about them, something that makes it relevant to them, right? It also gives context and reason for the interaction, so it's not this nebulous interaction. They have some idea of the premise for it, and premise will keep people there as well. Yeah?
I've been using that a lot, watching your stuff.
Uh-huh.
It works well, but I get stuck sometimes where I was like, you know, this is something really awesome about you, cute or whatever, and I like when I do the flip and I just can't find the negative thing because I really like the girl. Like, you're dumb or something like that and shit. It just comes out very congruent. Like, what would you do in that situation? Like, do you always like just pick up the perfect thing or you just make up shit up?
You know what? You're so cute, and I hate that I feel that way about you.
Okay. So it just doesn't matter. It's like,
Yeah.
I love, but I hate blank.
You're so cute, and I want to have a crush on you, I want to trust you, and because I feel so good with you, that makes me nervous. That's a negative, right? Any of that. Just go with any of that,
As long as you
right?
become cautious.
Or you can be like, you know what, you're so amazing, you're so cute, that like, I literally know that at some point I'm just gonna not even know what to say to you, and I'm gonna be lost for words, and that's just gonna be fucking awkward, so let's just end it now.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, why not? You can come up with anything. The actual like literal meaning, even though that's actually like saying you're so amazing and you're even more amazing is the literal meaning, is still in the format of a push-pull, so it will still have the same emotional reaction or same emotional effectiveness of a push-pull. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can do that. Just like literally say whatever's in your head, just couch it in that way, right? And you can say, you can say almost anything in a way that's extremely negative, extremely positive, or anywhere in between. Like for example, you can say, you're fucking hot. You can say, oh, you're actually relatively cute. You say like, you're kind of cute-ish, right? You can take the same thing and you can say it so many different ways, right? Or like, wow, you're actually kind of cute, right? By saying, they're like, actually, what do you mean? You didn't think I'd be cute? Right? You can say it by just couching it or just like using a little softener word here or there. You can completely change the meaning, and you can turn a statement that's all positive into a one-statement push-pull, right? Or you can take something very negative and you can do it that way too. Like, wow, you are like phenomenally evil, right? With a smile on your face, right? That's I'll say that as like, you are so much trouble, right? Which is like a negative, but I'm saying with a smile on my face and with arousal, and so it's like a push-pull in that one statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's definitely an art form.
Try, yeah. Hooking to a certain extent is an art. Like, I'm not gonna say that like once I've taught you like the technical steps to hooking, you're gonna hook every set. But what you will be able to do is when your sets hook, you'll understand why. And when your sets don't hook, you'll understand why. So that you'll be able to, like your brain will interpret it better and you'll become more consistent through the feedback. Right? I'm not gonna say that after hearing this, all of a sudden you're gonna go out and never have a set not hook. That's a lie. But at least I'll give you a context so you can learn it better. Okay, so that's focus, relevance. Next one is emotion. Emotion, super, super critical, okay? So say that the relevance is, I can teach you some interesting fact about life. That's fine. You could even use that. In fact, a lot of our like sort of pre-scripted routines back in the day were like that. Be like, hey, you know what's really interesting? I saw this interesting news thing, or hey, this is really interesting. Check out this little cool trick I can do, right? That's something interesting and relevant about life. So that's useful in that way. But the problem is, once you finish that topic, your relevance ends, right? Because your relevance is tied to the topic and not tied to you. Does that make sense? Right? So say that you are someone's teacher in a class. As long as you're teaching that class and they're taking notes and they care about the class, you're relevant. As soon as class is over, your relevance is 0. Right? You don't want that. So here's where emotion comes in. You need to make it emotional. You need to make it man to woman, make it you and them, and tie it to yourself. Okay? So that's when you want to say things like you can say like you have a very interesting look, that's relevance. But now you say you have a really interesting look, I kind of love it and I kind of hate it. Now you're tying it to you. You see that distinction? Right? You have an interesting look. Okay, once you're done talking about the look, you're done. You have an interesting look. I kind of love you and I kind of hate you. Now you're getting closer to making it emotionally relevant. Right? Or you could say you have an interesting look. I bet that has led to you being perceived as a certain way, or you being perceived in a certain way. And now you're tying into like the emotions they've had in other parts of their life. Right? You're tying into an emotional experience for them rather than just a factual conversation. Okay? Because what are emotions? Emotions quite literally are chemicals in the body. They quite literally are like chemicals and hormones flowing through your body. Okay? And the great thing about them is they will motivate us to do things that we would never be able to do without them. If we didn't have emotions, there's an old, this is a long-winded way of explaining it, but it's the best way I know. There's an old paradox in computer science. It's called like the Burden's donkey paradox. And the way it works is there's this donkey, and on one side of him, he has a big pail of water. Another side of him, he has a big tub of food. And he sits there thinking, I'm kind of thirsty, maybe I'll drink. And then he goes like, no, I'm more hungry, I think I'll eat. And they go, no, I'm more thirsty, I'll drink. No, I'm more hungry, I'll eat. He just sits there going back and forth, not knowing which is the bigger priority until he dies of hunger and thirst. Okay? Now that's a dumb story in real life, because no donkey would do that, no human being would do that. But a computer will do that. A computer, if it's not given a priority, will just vacillate and not do anything. Or vacillate and get like an infinite loop or something like that, right? So in computer science, this is like an important metaphor, because that's what would happen if we didn't have emotions. That's what a computer is. A computer is thought without emotion, right? And so without that emotional compulsion, there's no drive to go anywhere. There's no drive to do anything. You're not going to get a girl into you without compelling her emotionally, without getting those chemicals running in her body. It's so, so, so important. However, the problem with the chemicals is the chemicals will eventually subside. Eventually, if you stop stimulating her, the chemicals will flush out of her system and she won't feel that way anymore. Okay? So once you have that emotion, you have those chemicals, you have that ability to motivate and control and get something to happen. But if you don't do something with it, if you don't turn it into something tangible in the real world outside of just the chemicals in her body, when they subside, she will forget about you and flake. Or she will be that girl that's like happy, fun, kissing you and then be like, okay, bye, take care, and not attached to you. Because she hasn't made it tangible. Okay? And that's where the decision phase comes in. And this is what almost everybody misses. Right? I mean, I guess all these stages are things people miss, but the decision phase is what the advanced guys miss. The advanced guys don't get the decision phase. They don't get that compliance when they have that emotion. So the girl's feeling all emotional and bubbly and great, and then you get her, and then you're like, at that height of emotion, when she wants you there more than she's ever wanted anyone there, you go, you know what, you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, you can go. And at that moment, she really, really doesn't want to go. And so she's like, no, I'm good here. As soon as she says, I'm good here, now she's made that commitment to you. Now she's taken these emotions in her body and she's turned them into something real and tangible in the world. And that's when you have a solid hook. That's the equivalent to like when you're fishing and you get that little bite on the hook. And then like if you were just to reel it in, you probably wouldn't catch the fish. But if you set that hook hard and like get it really in the lip of the fish, that's when you have the hook. That's what the decision is. That's setting the hook, making sure there's that compliance. Okay? So that's the key thing to making a hook that lasts. And that's the key thing to getting a girl that will chase you and getting a set where she'll tell her friends, this is the ideal set. This is not going to happen often. This happened to be like a few times in my life. But the ideal set that you want is the set where at the end of the night, she says to her friends, look, I know you guys are trying to protect me. You're probably right. I'm probably dumb. But I like this guy. I'm going with him. And I don't care. Deal with it. And then walks off with you. Okay? I've even had girls stay in a country when their friends are leaving the country to stay with me and do that. That's fucking compliance. That's when you have a logical commitment. That's your ideal. It's not going to happen every set, but that's the ideal. That's what extreme compliance is, okay? Now, when you're looking for this decision phase, when you're looking for this compliance, it can happen in two forms. One is compliance, which is they come with you, right? Hey, come here, do this, and they do it. That's actual compliance. The other is non-compliance. Okay? And what that is when you do something that they should object to or they should reject you for, and they don't. Say you're talking to a girl, and you say to a girl, oh my God, you're such a fucking slut, I hate you. And she doesn't get angry, and she doesn't slap you in the face, and she doesn't run away, because she likes you too much and she's afraid to do it. In her mind, she has to rationalize to herself why she didn't. That's also a form of compliance. Okay, so that's a passive form of compliance. So one form of compliance is you say do this and she does it, or you pull her in and she does something with you physically. But then non-compliance is when you do something they should object to and they don't. But you need one or the other of those to really, really set the hook. Okay? So those are the stages of hooking. Focus, relevance, emotion, decision. If you get those 4, you have a hook. Now, in longer sets where like the hook takes a while, it's very easy to notice these distinct phases. But my contention is that even in the sets that hook immediately, or that you seem to have instantly hooked, all these phases occurred, they just happened lightning fast. Okay? So for example, say that you do this. Hey, you, come here. Oh, you're so cute. Right? Right there. Yeah. It's okay, you can face the camera too. Okay, cool. So that's an instant hook. Go ahead and sit down. So that's an immediate hook. But what happened, right? Hey, had detention. You, it's about you, it's relevant, it's a threat, it's something, right? It's a value or a threat, there's something going on, right? And then, come here, there's like that motion, that intensity in the eyes, which is gonna create some kind of emotion, and then you, and then she complied to it. So within that like split second, I went through all 4 phases. Does that make sense? Focus, relevance, emotion, decision, bam, immediately. And that can happen, and that's why you get your instantaneous hooks sometimes. There'll be other times I'm like, hey you, and she's like resistant, so now I have her focus a little bit, no relevance, no emotion, no decision, and then I have to work through a process to get there. Right? So some sets will hook quickly, some sets will hook longer, but that same process for the hook is in existence in all the sets. Does that make sense? Cool. So that's how to do the hook phase. Questions on any of that? Lots, good.
So basically, like when you're at an emotional high, that's when you should go for the decision, like specifically when you're at a high?
Yeah, when you're at an emotional high, it's a good time to escalate in general, and it's a good time to do pushaways in general. Okay, it's a good time to escalate because the escalation will be received, so you can escalate without risking a lot of social capital, right? So you're likely to get success, so it's likely to be a good escalation. And then on the other hand, it's a good time to do a pushaway because when it's on a high point and you push away, they're very likely to actually run away. They're very likely to try and snap back and get your attention back, right? So yeah, most of your either like extreme positive or negative expressions, your extreme escalation or your extreme negatives, should occur at high points. Those are the best optimal times for them, for sure. Yeah?
So how do you reconcile this with sort of like method just going out self-abusing and then getting hooked that way? Do you kind of do a mixture of both, or depends on the situation?
I think that self-amusement is not a direct form of hooking. It's a cross your fingers and hope form of hooking, but it's very effective. And the reason it's very effective is because self-amusing is one of the best ways to convey value, right? And so let's say you have focus, right? And then you need that relevance. That's going to come from either value or threat. So self-amusing is conveying value threat very strongly, okay? And so when you're conveying value or threat strongly, you're going to keep their attention for a period of time. And by keeping that attention for a period of time, there's a high likelihood that there will be something emotional that will happen that they can then lock onto, and the locking on may or may not happen organically. So you're hoping it happens organically, right? However, also, when you're having high value, when you have high value, people do react emotionally to high value itself. So you're very likely to get through that third phase of emotion as well. And if you self-amuse long enough, you have value, you have that emotion, and that emotion in the body, one of two things: either you will get some commitment or compliance at some point, again by accident, or if they have that feeling around you for long enough, even without commitment, they can sort of start to associate it with you. So that is another way to hook, right? So what you're doing when you self-amuse is you're ensuring that you're going to keep attention, or you're going to keep focus, and you're maintaining that you're going to keep relevance because you're being value threat very strongly, right? So you're basically saying by self-amusing that I'm going to stay good on those two levels, which means they'll stay with me and they'll stay engaged and aroused, and a lot of good things could happen from there. But my contention is, if you're self-amusing and understand this, you can make those last two phases happen much more regularly and much more quickly on an ongoing basis, right? So I would say combine the two. If you're not self-amused and if you seem reaction seeking, you're gonna fail at the second stage, which is the relevant stage. For example, say that a homeless person comes up and talks to you, right? He can get you to focus, he can yell at you, you'll focus, but whatever he's gonna say to you, there's no relevance because you don't view him as value, and if you view him as a threat, the way you view him as a threat is like a physical threat, so you're gonna run away, right? So he can't, because of the nature of his interaction with you, he can't be perceived as value or threat, so he's not gonna keep you there long enough to get anything real out of it. Does that make sense? That's because he's needy and not self-amused, and he wants something in the interaction. By being self-amused, you're ensuring that you buy yourself that window for the good things to happen.
Yeah, how do you screen for blueprints? Like, what type of things do you say?
That's an interesting question. I've never overtly thought about that. Usually with me, it comes up naturally. Although I do screen for blueprints when I'm looking to pull a girl. And so there, I guess, to take the metaphor of what I do there to everything, what I would do is think about what blueprints are common and then ask questions which are indicative of them, or do little tests which are indicative of them. So for example, one common blueprint might be the girl who wants like rules and structure, right? So you could ask a girl, are you the type of person who likes rules and structure and likes to know like what you're doing in life, or you're the type of person who likes to like kind of figure it out and like have sort of like the freedom to go your own way. Right? You could ask something like that, and depending on our answer, that could tell you, right? And what you can do when doing that, because blueprint is not a static thing. Blueprint is fluid, okay? So a girl's blueprint with a celebrity would be different than a girl's blueprint with someone who they know like through like their school and like are friends first with and maybe will consider a relationship down the road, right? There's a different blueprint to that context, and there's a different, they're basically playing a different role. So when you screen for blueprint, you're also directing blueprint if you're smart about it. And when you're screening for logistics, when you're screening to try and take a girl home or trying to like get a girl to leave a club with you, you're finding out her like availability, but you're also indicating to her the right things to say, and you're sort of moving her availability in that direction. Okay, so for example, one thing that I'll do to screen for pulling a girl is I would say, I'd like to screen for how protective are your friends, right? And I've always wanted to ask that question, but I was always afraid to ask that question because it's so obvious. It's so obvious I'm trying to pull them, right? And so what I came up with to do that is I softened it, and I also added the incentive for them to go a certain way. So I'd be like, so your friends, are they like extremely uptight and like if you walk 5 feet away from them they'll call the police, or are they like cool people who like know how to chill and like realize that you're an adult, right? So you're screening for it, and even saying it that way, some people are like, no, my friends are very protective, and you'll find out. But you're also encouraging the proper answer. Make sense? So understand that blueprint is fluid, and especially if a girl is attached to you or wants to please you, they will change their answers to things and will change their outlook. So you do want to screen it, but you also want to influence it at the same time as you are screening it. And so if that makes sense as well. But a lot of it could happen organically. The other thing that is really good, and this will come in to the next phase, which is the emotional connection phase, but it's the idea of qualification. Right, so qualifying a girl is getting her to jump through your hoops, finding out the reasons why you like her. But in the qualifying, you'll find out a lot about blueprint. So basically what I suggest, and this is good for everyone here, is think of like 5 non-physical things you'd like in a girl. And then when you're talking to the girl, once you have a hook, once you have a set that's willing to stay there and is a little bit invested, start finding out if she's those things you like. So that's going to do 2 things. Number 1, it's going to screen. Number 2, it's going to encourage. It's going to encourage her to be those things. So it's going to lead her down that path. Does that make sense? But in order to be screening for blueprints, I guess the answer is you need to know what blueprints you're screening for. Because you can either like just have the conversation and then just be aware when the things pop up. But if you want to overtly screen for a blueprint, have in your mind, here are the blueprints of girls I like, or here are the blueprints I want to encourage. And then you have to like sort of proactively screen. It's like if you do a science experiment, you usually start with a hypothesis. You start with something you're trying to test, and then you do an experiment to test it. You don't just like look at nature and consider that science. I mean, you can get ideas from that, but you want to start with hypothesis if you're trying to be formulaic. Make sense?
Let's say you look at a girl already, or you're pretty close, whatever, and you just find yourself in a situation where you're chasing. I find myself in that situation a lot. I get pissed because I'm like, God dang it, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to flip that. Can you go into that?
It's tough because it depends what you're chasing. If you're chasing her attention, you're in bad shape. Like if you have to keep going, hey, come back for attention, that's really tough and you're probably screwed.
I'm talking more
But,
about I'm escalating and it's just, you know.
Right. So if you're there, now you want to think about, it sounds like you have some hooked but not all the way hooked, right? It sounds like you have a partially hooked set, right? So it sounds like you probably have some relevance, some emotion, but she hasn't made any firm decision. So what I would do is I'd give her encouragement to make a decision. I'd do things like leave a little silence in the set. Or I'd do things like, instead of qualifying yourself, instead of saying how amazing you are, go the opposite way for a while and be like, nah, I'm nothing special. I seem charming at first, it goes away, don't worry. That kind of stuff. And make her commit to the fact that she's staying there even though you're doing unimpressive things or even though you're doing sort of like slightly rapport breaking things. Right, so I'd use that as an example. And then the most overt example would be I'd tell the girl she's free to go at times, but when it's at an emotional high. So even if you've been chasing, but it's an emotional high point is pretty good, you could tell her, oh, it's okay, you can go now. Right at that moment of emotional high, and that'll force it to flip. Yeah, but that's tough. If you're chasing the attention, you're fucked, or you're in really, really bad shape. But if you're anything past the attention phase, it's theoretically winnable. Does that make sense? You just have to like work through it, and it may take several tries. It may be a slow process of like switching the frame, but as long as you have the attention and are able to lead a little bit, you can theoretically chip away at it and get there. All right, so let's do emotional connection. We'll actually do emotional and physical connection a little bit together because that's how they should be done. Okay. Now, the reason we put emotional connection before physical connection back in the day was that the emotional connection motivates the physical more than, I guess, the physical necessarily motivates the emotional, and also because it's safer. It's safer to have more emotional connection and then go for the physical in terms of not losing the set than it is to be more physical or try and be more physical when you don't have any emotional connection. So that's why it was ordered that way, but the way it should be done is together. You should not be finding out the girl's most like intimate secrets and fantasies and have never touched her. You should also usually not be like getting super, super physical and hot and heavy and not even know her at all, unless you're already in a situation where sex can happen. If you're already in a situation where sex can happen, that's actually fine. But if you have to make further moves that are going to require her trust, you want to make sure there's some emotional connection along with the physical. Okay? The first stage, and actually the most important stage by far in emotional connection, is qualification. It's qualifying the girl, letting her know that there's a legitimate reason you like her, as opposed to just because she was the next girl. Also, a great thing about qualification is it actually builds its own value, because through the very act of qualifying a girl, the very act of finding out about a girl and putting her through hoops, asking her difficult questions, you're conveying to her that you are a selective guy. You're conveying to her that you are a guy who has options, you're a guy of high value, you're a guy she has to work for, that sort of thing. And it increases the emotional connection, the emotional arousal, and also the relevance factor. Okay? Does that make sense? So what is qualifying? Well, the most basic form of qualifying is switching the buyer-seller dynamic. Okay? The buyer-seller dynamic basically means that in any interaction, one person is selling themselves to the other one and the other person is deciding to a greater or lesser degree. It's very hard to be selling and buying at the same time. Okay, so you want to be on the buying side, not the selling side. You want them selling to you, you want them convincing you why they're good. Now, this is ironic because you walked up and you started the interaction, right? You started with them, so obviously, like, you already bought them, right? You need to sell yourself because you walked up, you're the one who needs to prove yourself. Well, not necessarily. That's only true if you believe it's true. That's only true if you let it be true. Okay, the metaphor we use for this is the Best Buy TV analogy, which is, say that you walk into Best Buy and you see a TV you like, and you mention to the salesman you like that TV. You don't now have to start selling yourself to the TV just because you walked up to it. Like, hey, I like this TV, and I want you to know I'd give this TV a good home. I have a good VCR. I have lots of channels. I wipe the screen regularly. I have a nice room that I think it'll be like well framed in. right? You don't have to do that. It doesn't matter. But you walked up to the TV, you showed interest first, but you can still be selective. Similarly to a girl, you'd be like, hey, what's up? I like you. Who are you? What are your features? Are you smart? Can you banter? Can you be sexy or are you boring? Right? You can do the same thing. You can flip the script. Who are you? I'm Todd.
Who are you?
Just a boy. I think I'm special, but I leave that open to your judgment. I try not to sell myself. Huh?
Are you here alone?
I am. I'm just walking through.
Okay. Just wondering if your friends told you to come over here or something.
No, I don't have any friends. I'm very shy.
I highly doubt that.
I actually don't like dating, so it's good. I prefer rendezvous with,
Rendezvous with random girls who are 20.
And the way I like to look at it is the prince has chosen you, okay? I'm the prince. I'm the prince. I've chosen the girl, and as of right now, she has an audience in my court, as long as she doesn't fuck it up. If she fucks it up, she's out of the court, right? So imagine you're a prince in a royal court, and you see some like common girl in one of the performing troops, and you think she's hot. And you say to your little minions, like, I want to meet her. Have her brought to me. She comes to you, and you're gonna evaluate her, and you chose her, but you're still the prince, and she's still a common girl. Does that make sense? That's the frame you should have. That's sort of the vibe you should have with this, okay? Because you're providing more of the value to the interaction. What you can provide to the interaction as a man to just about any woman is not just more than that nice warm wet hole they're providing, but like literally like thousands or millions of times more. It's no contest, okay? That's what you're bringing to the table, right? If you were to walk up to a girl and you had a check in your back pocket for $10,000 with her name on it, would you feel nervous about giving it to her? Would you feel nervous about asking her a couple questions before giving her the check? Absolutely not, because you know you're offering value. Now you should ask yourself as a man, with all the things you can provide in terms of great experiences, learning opportunities, influence, inspiration, material resources, all of that kind of stuff, are you, if you're willing to commit to a girl, worth well more than that $10,000? Probably like orders and orders of magnitude more, right? So you should not feel nervous walking up and talking to a girl. You should not feel you need to qualify yourself to the girl. And you should feel that you want to find a girl who's worthy of that, because there are plenty of options, okay? So that's the kind of the vibe you should have and the idea of qualification. And then within qualification, understand that it's again another escalation. It's another form of social capital. So every time you demand something of a girl and she says yes to it or goes along with it, you build your social capital, you get closer to her. You're also getting to know her, right? Which is good too. So qualification is great because it's one of the very few things you can do that builds value and comfort at the same time. Okay, almost everything you do that builds value destroys comfort, right? Being a badass, being an asshole, being non-needy, being a super assertive builds value, makes her trust you less because it makes it seem like you have too many options, okay? Getting to know a girl, telling her your innermost secrets, confessing vulnerabilities builds comfort, lets her get to know you, but it destroys your value, right? But qualification does both at once. Because you're putting her through the hoops, you're being a selective man, but you're taking the time to get to know her and show her why she's special. That's why qualification is so beautiful. And that's why for me personally, most of my game is in qualification. I take the qualification phase from basically almost from the open to all the way to the bedroom. Even like right up until like my penis is almost inside of them, it's all qualification phase. Does that make sense? It's absolutely huge because, again, it can build value and comfort at the same time, which makes it beautiful. By the way, the one other thing I've found in communication that does value and comfort at the same time is storytelling. That's the other one, right? Because storytelling, you're leading the frame, you're dictating the interaction, you're controlling what's going on, but you're also letting the girl into your life, giving her a window to get to know you. So that's the other thing that builds value and comfort at the same time. So storytelling and qualification, two of the most powerful tools you can possibly have in game for that reason. Because they're, as far as I know, if you can come up with other ones, please let me know. I'd love to know them. But they're the two things I know of that build value and comfort at the same time. Okay? So important. All right, so how do you qualify? Well, first it helps to know what you want to qualify on. So that exercise I told you, come up with 5 non-physical traits you'd look for in a girl. That's a good one. Another good one, if you want to qualify and encourage at the same time, is think about the traits that she could have that would lead to the relationship you want. Okay, so you qualify for her for who she is, also qualify for her for what type of relationship she can give you in general in the long term or for tonight. Okay, so you can qualify her logistics. You can qualify her beliefs. You can qualify her attitudes and adventurousness. Those are all sort of same night qualifiers. And if I'm qualifying for a one night stand, those are the types of things I'm doing, right? If I'm qualifying for more of a long-term thing, I'd qualify for, is she educated? Is she financially independent? Does she have freedom and flexibility in her life? Is she sexually open? Does she like to learn things? Those are my personal ones. Those might be completely the opposite for you. Who knows? But those are personal ones I'd be qualifying on, okay? But the idea is I have an idea in my head of the perfect girl that I'm looking for in general. I also have an idea in my head of the perfect scenario and the perfect type of attitude and structure to the story for a one night stand or for a dating scenario. And depending on what I decide is the optimal scenario for the particular logistics of a particular girl, I start qualifying to that. Okay, so if I'm looking for the one night stand, I qualify hard on the one night stand stuff. If I find out that the girl cannot do a one night stand for very plausible reasons, and I just need to get a phone number and follow up, I'll qualify her for things like how we can meet up on the date and what kind of person she is and whether she's someone I'd enjoy spending that kind of time with, that sort of thing. So I'm qualifying her towards the end that I have in mind, okay? And that end can be sex, date, relationship, threesome, whatever it is, you can qualify them to that. And again, you're screening for it, but you're also encouraging them to it. So you always couch things in such a way that you're saying that what you want is the good option and what you don't want is the bad option in subtle ways. Does that make sense? Cool, so that's qualification. So important in terms of being a man of value, in terms of letting them know that there's something special about them. You'll find as you get better in game that a lot of times girls will be overwhelmed by you, will feel like you're overqualified, will feel like, do you ever get girls saying like, oh, you could get so many other girls, you're such a player, why are you even with me, that sort of stuff? That's a situation where the girl sees so much value in you, she doesn't feel qualified. And so she's less likely to sleep with you because she feels like it's not special. She feels like she'll just be another notch on her bedpost, and that detracts from the experience for her. But if you can find a few things about her that are special, even if she still doesn't feel like she deserves you, actually especially if she still doesn't feel like she deserves you, but she feels special in some way, that makes a great experience for her, right? One girl I slept with very recently, she just, for whatever reason, she convinced herself, and as part of the experience, that I was like the most connected guy in Vegas. And like I was like the most like successful life together guy she'd ever met. And it was actually absolutely bizarre. So like we went back to the place where I'm staying, which is just like an apartment complex, but she was like convinced in her head, in order to like make the narrative work, she was convinced it was a super luxury hotel. She's convinced. And then like I'm walking around and I have this key card. She's like, why do you have access to all these places in the hotel that like you wouldn't normally have access to? Who are you? Like you're not just a public speaker, you're somebody. Who are you? And she's just convinced in her head that I must be somebody. I didn't even do anything to really feed into it. All I did was like I just didn't qualify myself, and I qualified her a little bit. And then like I didn't like want to talk about work, right? Even when she was giving me compliments about it. And that's it. So that combined with the fact that she was aroused and wanted me to be higher value, she created that experience for herself. But that's the experience the girl wants. The girl wants, one second, she wants the experience of the guy who she absolutely doesn't deserve, but for some reason there's something special in the interaction. You have great chemistry, you have this thing in common, and it makes it beautiful because she's not just the next girl either. Yeah?
You give us an example of the kind of conversation we go like, so you ask her questions, like are you into yoga or meditation? Like for example, these are my qualifying questions. And when she says yes, you're like, oh my God, that's good. Like, you know, like, or how does the routine go for you?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like for example, one of mine is she fit, right? So I'll like feel her out, like, oh, you're strong, do you work out? Right? And then depending where it's at, I can give either positive or negative feedback to her answer, and I can give graded feedback too. So if a girl is massively beneath me, or like feels like she's massively beneath me, then I can just be like, oh, you do that, I love that, that's so amazing, that's so cool that you do that. If a girl's like a solid fucking hard heavy 10 with like attitude, who like dates like professional athletes and like hedge fund billionaires and shit like that, then I wouldn't be like, oh my God, that's so amazing you do yoga. Like that's too easy. Like please, she hasn't earned shit for that. right? Because what the guys she's used to are used to girls that have done, you know, all kinds of crazy, amazing things and stuff like that. So like if a girl's like I do yoga, be like, oh, so you teach it or you just go to classes, right? Or like, oh, so you've like done like some like crazy training like all over the world and stuff, or you just go to like your little whatever. Or you'd be like, oh, so you mean like that really intense like hot yoga, right? And if they're like, no, you're like, oh, like yeah, that's still cool, right? That sort of thing.
The fact that you're asking the questions communicates that you're qualified. It just feels it in the body. You don't need to be like, oh my god, that's great. Now I like you. I didn't like you before.
Exactly. And then it can be just in subtle little things too. It can be just like the look you give her after, right? So you're like, you can even qualify like on where someone's from. Like, where are you from? They answer, you're like, oh, okay, well, anyway, change of topic, right? And they're like, wait, what's wrong with where I'm from, right? So that's the negative one. Or if you need to give them a positive, you could do like, hey, where are you from? Oh my God, I love that city actually. I went there and blah, 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 blah. Make sense?
Yeah.
So you have the option at any time to give them something very positive or very negative. And by choosing how positive or negative to make it, you control the level of qualification. Right? And again, for like the hot girl that needs a lot of value and not as much comfort, you're gonna qualify like harsher and with a lot less positive feedback. And with the girl that like already like loves you and feels like she doesn't even deserve you, you're gonna just keep giving back to her and letting her feel like she's like on the same level somehow. The other thing that you can do along the same line as qualification is kind of like reverse qualification, is whenever they ask you questions, you can either make them impressive if you need value, or you can ground it onto their reality if you need comfort. So for example, for me, I have a lifestyle where I travel the world, I meet a lot of people, I'm doted on to a certain extent in certain things that I'm doing. It sounds like a pretty cool lifestyle to a girl. Like most girls would fucking love to be in my lifestyle. They actually wouldn't, because they wouldn't like to do the work, but the picture they have of my lifestyle, they actually love it, right? And so when I tell them that, it sounds really, really cool. Now, if a girl's already insecure and I tell her that, she just gets overwhelmed. She's like, oh shit, you're like way above me. So if a girl asks me what I do and I know she's like kind of not there, not on the same level with me, I'm like, yeah, it's interesting. I actually was really, sort of like shy in college. I was actually kind of insecure about my career. And so I didn't want to go get a job in that particular career. So I took kind of a crazy risk, and I was actually probably stupid at the time. I got really lucky, but right? So you're grounding this like crazy reality onto coming from a situation like them, so it makes it relevant and relatable to them, right? So that's if they're like way beneath you. If they're like way like super, they're used to dating like really high-end people and shit like that, and like whatever you're gonna say to them is not that impressive, then you'd be like, yeah, I don't like talking about my job. People always seem to like define me based on it. I want you to like me for me, and then once we like each other, we can talk about all that shit. But I don't want our attraction or our relation to be built on anything superficial. So let's just keep it us for now, right? And that's like this whole like, I don't even want to tell you, I'm not trying to impress you thing, and that can work really well with those girls that are used to the super high value guys. So it's calibrating to the situation, yeah.
So by asking these qualifying questions, are you building compliance each time that she answers them at the same time you're qualifying them?
Yes, that would be true. That's correct. The other things to keep in mind in terms of connection and comfort are very similar. And the key thing that builds comfort is time, okay? Here's why. Can anyone define comfort for me? What is comfort?
Cigar.
Huh? What is comfort? Can anybody actually give me a definition for the word comfort? Connection is a synonym. Not a definition, but it's a synonym, kind of.
It feels in the body, it's like you just relax, you're just like, okay, I'm like cool with this person.
Okay, so relax, being cool, more synonyms.
Yeah.
How it feels, we know it's a feeling, that's good.
Yeah, you just share anything.
Right, so you're doing things that occur in comfort, things that are similar to comfort, but it's still not a definition, right?
Someone you could see yourself with in the future.
Okay, so being able to see someone, but that's still not a definition of comfort, right? That's a characteristic of feeling comfort, but it's still not a definition.
What about the lack of danger or threat?
There, perfect, right? That's actually not even a definition either, it's a negative definition, but that's the only way to define comfort, okay? You can't define comfort in the positive, you can only define it in the negative, okay? So what is comfort? Comfort is lack of discomfort, okay? It's like, we know, you go to the gym and you get your muscles sore, you know what a sore muscle feels like. But what does a non-sore muscle feel like? who knows? This is just, it's not sore, right? Comfort is a lack of discomfort, right? There is no feeling of comfort, there's just lack of discomfort. So the biggest thing that builds comfort is time. It's time without discomfort, right? That's what builds comfort. And that's why it oftentimes takes time to sleep with a girl, is because that comfort can't build instantly, because if you have like a feeling of not being sore in your body for a second, who cares? You're not used to it, you don't notice it, it's not a big deal yet, right? It takes time for it to become relevant. It takes time for it to mean something, okay? So comfort is built on time. That's why you need to be patient in your game. That's why you need to allow it to grow naturally. That's why you need to let the movie play out, right? If you're trying to make things happen too fast, it's going to, number one, take away your opportunity to build comfort, but number two, the effort that you're putting into it is going to create massive discomfort, right? Because it's conveying that you're the type of guy who hasn't been there before, you're the type of guy for whom this is a big deal, it's a heavily emotional, it's a heavily invested thing, okay? And that's not what you want. For a girl to come with you, for a girl to come home with you, here is the absolute best phrase that I've ever heard for getting a girl to come home, and credit to for this one. He said, we're gonna go someplace, let's see, we're gonna go somewhere lovely that you will love. And if you don't, well then you can go home. And it doesn't really matter either way, because I'm having a good time, and that's all that really matters, right? That's the exact perfect phrase for a pull, okay? We're gonna go somewhere lovely that you will love. Okay, we're going to do something positive. Here's the key part. And if you don't, you can leave. Okay, it's not a big commitment, it's not a big hassle, you can always get out of it. You don't sell how amazing it is, you sell that it's not a big commitment, right? Like a lot of people, they'll see a product and if it seems really amazing, they won't buy it because it seems too amazing, they don't believe it. But a lot of people will buy something because there's a money back guarantee, right?
Can you say the whole thing again?
The whole phrase? We're gonna go somewhere lovely that you will love. And if you don't, well then you can go home. And either way, it doesn't matter because I'm having a good time and that's what really matters, right? Okay, that's the phrase. He says you can go home, I say you can leave, but it's the same thing. That's the general idea, okay? So you don't sell the positive, you don't sell the huge upside. The fact that they're with you for a period of time, the fact that they've committed time to you, the fact they've escalated physically, they like you. You don't have to sell the upside, that's already there. What you have to sell is the lack of downside. You have to sell that it's not a big risk, right? So you sell the money back guarantee. If you don't like it, you can leave. Make sense? Right? That's absolutely key. And then the last part, doesn't matter because either way I'm having fun and that's what really matters. I'm not in this to get laid. If it happens, it's great. I'm not in this to get something from you. I'm not in this to use you. I'm having a good time. It's about the experience. It should be about the experience for you because that's what it is for her. For her, it's about the experience too. So that's making it relatable, okay? But that's the idea. You're gonna come with me, it's not a big commitment, it's not a big deal. If I'm trying to push too fast, if I'm trying too hard, it is a big deal and that builds discomfort. That's gonna get in the way, okay? Comfort is built over time, so you need to have patience. Now, don't have a patience where you're not escalating. Don't have the kind of patience where you're just sitting there doing nothing, being like, I'm just killing time, this sucks, right? You still have to be engaged in the conversation, you still have to stay engaged in the interaction, because if you're disengaged, that conveys that you have no chemistry and that's gonna build discomfort. Okay, so you still have to stay engaged. It's not just a matter of like, it's not a matter of setting your like watch and being like, okay, I'll just sit in silence for 3 hours and then at that point I'll leave with her. It doesn't work like that for a number of reasons. One being that the disengagement builds discomfort. Two being that the interaction, as you get more calm, the emotions sort of subside and that needs to be replaced with something. Okay, here's probably the last model I'm gonna give you guys. But think of an axis, think of a graph, where this is like arousal and this is time, okay? And think about like the amount of energy you're putting into the set. At the start of the set, you're putting a lot of energy in. You have to be very like on top of it, get their attention, keep their attention, move things forward, be witty, like have a good response to shit tests, a lot of energy. Then over time, it's gonna gradually go down because at some point you're gonna be like just sitting they're sitting on your lap, you're cuddling, you're just like shooting the shit, nothing really is going on verbally. Okay? And that's more what leads to sex because sex comes out of that calm, comfortable, but aroused vibe. But the problem is, as the energy level goes down, the set is less interesting and less fun. And so a lot of guys will lose the girl when they start getting into that comfort phase because it's not as much fun anymore. So what do? you must replace that energy with something else. And what that is physicality. So as the emotions are subsiding, or the caloric burn, so to speak, the amount of like energy being put into the set is subsiding, you need to increase the physical to match it so that the total sum of the energies kind of stays constant, kind of stays level. Does that make sense? So you go from this very hyper interaction with not a lot of physicality to this very calm interaction with very sensual, close to sex physicality, and then it's just a natural transition to sex. Especially if, as I've said over and over again, they're complying and they're going with you along the entire way. So that's the whole thing, is to get them chasing and get them participating and allow enough time for them to fill that gap and for them to feel that comfort. Specifically, if you want to build comfort, there are two different types of comfort that you can build, or two types of connection, I guess, that you can build. One is what we call wide rapport, and one is what we call deep rapport. Wide rapport is the idea that you can talk about anything with someone. Deep rapport is the idea that there are a few topics that you have very much in common. You can have nice, deep conversations as opposed to superficial gossip. And ideally, you want both. Okay? If you're talking all about one topic and only one topic, you will get a nice, heavy, deep conversation with a girl. But as soon as she comes out of that conversation, she's going to feel like, whoa, that was really deep. I guess I could talk about like that one thing with this guy, but that's it. And she's not going to want to see you again, and she's not going to feel deeply connected to you. If you talk about a million things superficially, she'll be like, oh, that guy's a fun conversation. That's a good chit chat. But there's no real deep emotion being aroused. She hasn't gone really into something. And so for that reason, she won't necessarily, she'll be fine with seeing you again. She won't feel uncomfortable about it, but she won't be deeply motivated. Okay, so the one is motivating but uncomfortable. The other is comfortable but not very motivating. And what you want is both. You want that deep rapport where there's that motivation to see something, there's something intense there. And then you also want some wide rapport where you've talked about a lot of different topics. So ideally the conversation, if you want to like have a girl not flake, if you want a girl to see you again, that sort of thing, or if you just want her to feel very connected to you in that night and it's a longer pull, not like a quick clubby pull, you want to have that combination of wide and deep rapport. Okay, so that's the last thing I'd say to focus on in terms of all that. And that's going to enhance the experience of comfort. So we said comfort's built on time, right? Comfort's built on time, and time is therefore a necessary component. However, there are things you can do to make time appear to pass faster. There's a reason why some sets take 7 hours to pull, and some sets take half an hour, an hour. And the reason is, well, part of the reason is the girl's blueprint. Some girls need more value and less comfort. But another reason is what the nature of the time spent is. Okay, so if you're spending time and you're doing some wide and deep rapport, that's going to make it seem like you spent more time together. In fact, you've had those deep topics and a lot of topics. It's going to make it seem like the time you spent together means more, so it sort of like dilates the time, right? The other one is multiple locations. If you spend a time with a girl in 3 or 4 different places instead of standing in one place, it makes it seem as though you've spent more time with her, so that comfort ends up being built more rapidly. Because it's not about the actual passage of time, it's about the subjective feeling of time. Okay? So things that you can do to make it subjectively feel like you've been together longer, you've talked about more things together, introduce her to more of your friends, those all build comfort faster. The other one you can do is the more similarities or things in common you have with her, the more likely you are to build comfort. Because, say me, I'm a soccer player. I played soccer most of my life. I've known a lot of people who are soccer players. I've had a lot of friends who are soccer players. If I meet a girl and she's a soccer player, I feel as though I know certain things about her by association. And it's like by having spent time with all those other people in my life, I've spent some time with her because I'm associating her with that group. Right? Does that make sense? So by associating with a group or associating with an activity or a commonality, that can also make time seem to pass faster. So those are things you can do to make that comfort time not take eons and eons. All right? Yeah.
Apart from God and aliens, are there particularly good deep rapport subjects?
What your passions are good. Sexual experiences, intimate experiences are good. Things like family can be good. Travel can be good in some contexts, stuff like that. But like passions is a good one. Like anything that you're talking passionately about is a really good go-to.
Okay. I mean, this may not be fair, but the chody subjects, in other words, the subjects that most guys would talk about were okay.
Yeah, most guys would talk about those like before the girl's committed, but you should talk about them after. Yeah, and you should also be careful that because they are chody subjects, you don't go so much into them and stop having emotional spikes. Even as you're having these, like I can have a very deep conversation with a girl, and as I'm having it, I'll still make fun of her every now and again, right? I'll still make sure there's emotional spikes. It doesn't completely ever go away. Like there's less value being utilized and more comfort, but it's not like I ever turn down the value completely. It's not like I ever completely like chode out. Okay, so you don't want to go too far that way either. And then the last thing is the physical escalation, which brings us right back full circle to closing, right? Physical escalation, absolutely paramount that you do it, that you are constantly pinging for and trying to do it, trying to move forward, but also that it's not so needy and aggressive that it's too obvious. So this is where you get into 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that sort of thing, right? Push to the point of a little bit of discomfort and then chill it out, back off, and then try again, right? Absolutely critical with the physical connection. And then all the things I said before about making a move, but making it in a subtle way so that she has a chance of accepting it, but if she doesn't accept it, it's not a big negative. So you want to be constantly, relentlessly pushing forward, but not in a way that can hurt you, okay? So those are all 5 of the phases of the pickup: open, hook, emotional connection, physical connection, and close. I want to emphasize to you again, as I did at the start, the close is the objective. So everything you do in all the other phases needs to be geared towards the close, not just geared towards getting through that phase or getting to the next phase, okay? If you do things to hook a girl that are gonna make her distrust you so much that you're not gonna be able to build comfort later, you may get the hook, but you're gonna make it very hard for other things to happen, okay? If you manage to get the emotional connection in such a way that the girl feels really close to you, but in the process, you destroy all your value and you make it way too obvious you like the girl, you're gonna hurt the idea of her chasing you and participating later, and you're gonna end up with a vibe of you pushing and her resisting, right? So there are all these things, all these little things you can do along the way that will get you further along towards the 5th step, but will actually hurt the 5th step itself, will actually hurt the closing itself. So what you want to do in game is you want to be constantly moving forward, but you want to make sure that what you're doing to move the interaction forward is not hurting the close, okay? Remember, always keep the close in mind. That's the important part. That's the victory. All the little steps are nice along the way, and especially if you're learning and you have trouble with it, do what you have to get there, but always in the back of your mind, remember that it's moving towards the close, not just towards the next little box that you're checking off along the way.